host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest tonight is Eric London. He is a writer for the World Socialist website, and he is the author of Agents, the FBI and GPU Infiltration of the Trotskyist Movement. Welcome, Eric. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hi there, Sabrina. Thank you for having me.
So, Eric, I show a lot of articles on this show from the World Socialist website. One of the issues that we've been talking about recently are the problems with DSA and how we believe that democratic socialism actually is not enough. And it was actually a video I saw from a YouTuber called Second Thought. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he did an entire video explaining the economic breakdown about why democratic socialism actually is not enough because it still operates in a capitalist system. And I know you have a similar opinion. So first, I do want to talk to you about that. What do you feel are some of the problems with DSA, the organization in general, and democratic socialism?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. I wouldn't say that the DSA or democratic socialism isn't enough. The DSA is a capitalist organization. It's a part of the pro-imperialist Democratic Party. That's the role the DSA has played since its founding in the early 1980s, even from before then. So not to quibble, but it's actually the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, all its associated publications, Jacobin, Socialist Forum, etc. They're simply a part of the capitalist imperialist political establishment. Our criticism isn't that they should be something else. It's that workers and young people who are interested in socialism should know what they actually are, what their history is, what their class character is, and what role they play in the two-party system.
Interesting. What's your take on, we've talked about the railroad strike or the railroad workers attempting to go on strike. And we've talked about, the squad in Congress choosing to be strike breakers in a sense, even though we know that legislation was not going to pass in that way. But it's still the principle, I think, for a lot of us is like, if you are a democratic socialist, you are not supposed to be a strike breaker. Now, we did see that DSA did issue a statement when that did happen, and they said that they were disappointed with the actions of people like AOC, but they approved of the actions of Rashida Tlaib because she did not vote in that way. What's your take on this? I know DSA has spoken out against some of these actions that squad members have taken that really do not follow DSA principles. But why do you feel that an organization like DSA is not holding them more accountable?
Well, actually, the issue that you're raising gets exactly to the role that the DSA plays, because they have to walk this tightrope. Their politicians, the members of their organization who they are accountable to, who are accountable to them, as you said, they all voted to scab on the railroad strike. They voted, and I think those who are watching and listening have to understand, there were 100,000 railroad workers who wanted to strike. Now you've seen in East Palestine, Ohio, by the way, the implications of the DSA's vote and the absolutely devastating and criminal impact that the policies of the rail carriers like Norfolk Southern have had on the rail industry and on these communities, on the working class as a whole. But the DSA tries to, their political representatives, their figures play a role, which is to suppress the class struggle. That's what the railroad vote was proof of. Now, when the organization comes out and says, oh, well, we disagree with that, I mean, it's a meaningless, totally meaningless statement, just like statements by the DSA, which claim that they're anti-war. But what they're trying to do, and this gets to, we've used the term, the DSA's role as a catchment area for the Democratic Party, because their entire purpose, and this has been the case since Michael Harrington founded the organization in 1982, And since the predecessor organization, the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee, was formed in 1972, their purpose is to take leftward moving young people and workers who associate themselves with socialism and to bring them into the Democratic Party, where their left-wing aspirations can be stifled and moved behind the Biden administration in this case.
Interesting. See, this is something that we've kind of had a feeling that this is what was going on. What do you think it's going to take to wake more people up to this? Now, I did see that DSA has lost a good amount of members in the past year or so, like 10,000 members have left DSA. Do you think that this is part of the reason that they're not actually upholding their principles of the organization?
Well, so a lot of people joined the Democratic Socialists of America thinking that they had something to do with socialism. That was a mistake on their part, but there aren't any other organizations aside from the Socialist Equality Party which present themselves as socialist. And so many people who joined the DSA figured that they were joining an organization which was against war, which was against the two parties. But what they didn't realize was that, as I indicated, the entire history of the DSA, and I mean, you really do have to, in order to understand the class character of an organization, you have to understand its roots. And Michael Harrington, who himself came out of he was the progeny of an individual named Max Shachtman. Now, I won't get into all the history because we don't have time here, but Harrington founded this organization explicitly on the basis of serving as a pro-State Department, pro-American imperialism type of organization, initially during the period of the Vietnam War, but this developed over the course of the 70s through the Carter administration. Ever since, they've played the role of essentially somewhat of a left criticism of the Democratic Party establishment, but really ultimately serving to block young people and workers from breaking with the Democratic Party and from looking for socialist internationalist politics. So that's sort of what it is an operation. I mean, it comes from the state. There's no question about that. So I hope I haven't.
I was going to say, thank you so much for making that very clear to people, because I think some people still don't really understand that. And I think that what you pointed out brings up something, and I want to highlight this comment here because DJK said its founder, same thing, Michael Harrington, stated explicitly that the DSA is part of the Democrats. And I think this is important for people to understand, because then they will realize why, or get a true sense of why these squad members in Congress are not pushing back against Democrat leadership, because again, they're still a part of that party and they also don't want to lose their seats. But if this is an operation of sorts, like you say, then it all becomes clear.
Exactly. So that's why if you take the Ukraine war, and it's very much related to the railroad issue, because American imperialism, in order to dominate the world, has to suppress the working class here at home. And so when the entire DSA slate votes to give $40 billion to the Bandera-aligned Ukrainian government and its military to prolong and escalate the war in Ukraine, this is part and parcel of the role that the DSA has played for very many years. If I can quote briefly, Michael Harrington gave an interview in the New York Times in 1984, and he said the following, which is really important for understanding their whole character. He said, "When I criticize American foreign policy, our intervention in Central America," keep in mind this was a period when American imperialism was backing dictatorships across Latin America. This continues today, of course, but there were genocidal campaigns being carried out in Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras, etc. But Harrington said, "When I criticize American foreign policy, our intervention in Central America, I do that in the name of the national security of the United States. Our critique is that President Reagan's policy with regard to Nicaragua does not promote national security, it hurts it." In other words, that's the end of the quote. In other words, proceeding totally from the basis of how to best carry out the interests of American imperialism. And that's the same role that they're playing today.
There's a question here from Danny. I think this is a good question. Is the DSA subject to DNC rules and regulations, to your knowledge?
Unofficially, yes. Many of its leaders, including one of its vice chairs, David Duhalde was himself a former official of the Democratic National Committee. By the way, recently, we've heard that a number of DSA chapters have actually had DSA leadership bring figures associated with the Pentagon in to talk to the clubs about why they must support the war in Ukraine. So, for example, you may have seen this, but for example, there was an individual in Seattle named Dennis Bonder, who's a Tulane University professor. He's won grants from DARPA. He's won awards from the US Army. He was brought in by the leadership of the DSA in Seattle, Washington, to talk to the members of the DSA about why they have to get behind the US efforts to escalate the war against Russia, which is a nuclear armed power, as you know. So that's when we say, are they taking orders from the DNC? Is it in the DNC's statutes? I don't know about that, but it's certainly in its political DNA.
This is very interesting to hear, and it does explain why they have, supported this conflict here between Russia and Ukraine, why they have not tried to advocate for some type of peace, which more and more people are starting to call for. It just all makes sense in the way that they vote in reference to legislation when it comes to sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. So I'm curious, knowing what you know, do you support the strategy of putting progressives through the Democratic Party?
No, not at all. In no way. I mean, the challenge of the socialist movement has always been to develop a movement in the working class which is conscious of its revolutionary role. That applies here in the United States. This is a working class which is extremely oppressed. It's extremely, as you know, anti-communism has been an official state religion in the United States for over a century. Our role is not to try and work through the Democratic Party. I mean, the Democratic Party has been around for 200 years. It was the party of slavery, the party of Indian removal, the party of Japanese internment, the party of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Korea and Vietnam and Iraq twice and Syria and Libya, et cetera, et cetera. There is no changing this imperialist organization, which is drenched in blood. And same with the Republicans. And the obligation of socialists in this country and all around the world is to fight to give the working class the understanding that it has to have, which is not going to come through bourgeois media, is not going to come through the two-party system, of the fact that it is tremendously powerful. And if it is armed with a socialist perspective, it is going to be capable in alliance and in collaboration with its brothers and sisters in every single country around the world of bringing an end to the capitalist system. And that's the only thing that's going to stop the Biden administration and the two parties from waging a nuclear war against Russia.
What do you think about Kshama Sawant's new organization, Workers Strike Back? Now, that is officially launching on March 4th. Apparently, that's also the same day that Marianne Williamson is scheduled to make an announcement. I think we all know what that announcement is going to be, possibly that she is going to primary Joe Biden. What do you think about that particular organization working on the outside? Like Kshama Sawant and her group, Socialist Alternative, they're trying to get something out there in the streets for workers' rights, to get people to come together, at least on those issues, kind of the way that Chris Smalls did with the Amazon workers, but this more so on a national scale. How do you feel about something like that? People getting aligned with that instead of focusing on like this strategy of putting progressives through the Democratic Party?
Well, the problem with Kshama Sawant and that strategy is that Socialist Alternative has spent the last 2 years promoting the Democratic Socialists of America. So Kshama Sawant herself entered the DSA, I think it was at the end of 2020, and presented this as a great vehicle for the transformation of American society. That has been exposed as a completely bankrupt and disastrous decision, which she and her organization made. Now, they didn't issue any explanation for how they led their entire membership into the Democratic Party. So I think this Workers Fight Back strikes one as more of an act of desperation to distract from their decision to work within the DSA and the Democratic Party. So there's obviously a desire on the part of so many people for a genuinely independent working class perspective. And there are all these traps being set up by Socialist Alternative, by the DSA. The challenge is, and I think what distinguishes the World Socialist website and the Socialist Equality Party here, we're fighting to mobilize the rank and file. There was a candidate who ran for the president of the UAW named Will Lehman. He won almost 5,000 votes on an explicitly socialist revolutionary program to transform not only the auto industry, but the world economy. He won a substantial amount of votes in Texas and Tennessee and Kansas, Missouri, all over the country. It showed there is an audience for socialism, but it's time to stop dumbing it down. It's time to stop pretending like there has to be the Democratic Party is the end all be all of all social movements, when every lesson from history shows that it's the graveyard.
What do you mean when you say that Socialist Alternative supports the Democratic Party? I'm asking you to elaborate on that, because I've interviewed Khamma Sawant multiple times and they denounced that. So I'm curious, could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would encourage, by the way, there was an article which Kayla Costa, who's another World Socialist website writer, and I wrote, I think about 6 weeks ago, on Workers Strike Back. Because we have to take these, we take people at their word, but we also take people on the basis of what their entire organizational experience is. You don't judge someone based on what they say about themselves. You judge them, and especially if they're a political person, based on what they've done. So Khamma Sawant is someone who's got some experience in politics in Seattle, and she's been endorsed by a number of Democratic Party organizations. She was promoting AOC. She was promoting Jayapal. And I think, by the way, I don't want to forget about this, but the experience with the Progressive Caucus in October, when they wrote this letter calling for negotiations and then rescinded it within 24 hours. AOC, by the way, said that was an example of maturity. She said that only real politicians understand the responsibility that they have. In fact, it was an abject lesson in the total cowardice of the pseudo-left. But Sawant plays a similar role. And I think they're trying to set themselves up to be the next catchment area because of this crisis, which has developed in the DSA.
Okay, the reason why I asked that question is because on Socialist Alternative's website, it explicitly states here, under for a new political party for working people, it says unions and social movement organizations should stop funding and supporting the Democratic and Republican parties and instead organize independent left-wing anti-corporate candidates and coalitions as a first step towards building a workers' party. So again, like I've interviewed Khamma Sawant multiple times on this show, and every time she's come on, she has denounced the Democratic Party and the two-party system as a whole. She actually did not run through the Democratic Party. So I think I'm just a little bit confused here. When she came on to talk about Worker Strike Back, she came on the night that it was announced, and she explained explicitly what this organization is about. And I even asked her if there was a plan to run candidates, and she said that is not the focus at this point in time. It's organizing labor movements. So I'm just curious. Again, I haven't seen any proof that they've put people into the Democratic Party.
Well, except I would ask her the next time you speak to her, how can she explain the fact that she has, and I'm not making it about her as an individual. In fact, the World Socialist website, by the way, defended her from the fascist attacks that were coming from the far right when she was in the city council. But we disagree with her fundamentally on what our conception of socialism is, because her conception is that you can do it by joining the Democratic Party, which is the DSA. The DSA is not something which is different than the Democratic Party. So
no, I'm sorry. Khamma Sawant has never said that. Again, she's been on this show multiple times. She has never said... Now, she has never said to join the Democratic Party, not once. In fact, she said the opposite. And she's also had these conversations on bad faith with Brianna Joy Gray and has said the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. But the point is, politically, it's not just what people say about themselves. Why did she then join the DSA at precisely the moment when the DSA was supporting imperialist war, when the DSA was voting to crush the railroad strike? Now, right after those votes.
No. She didn't join the DS. I'm sorry, Eric. I'm sorry. She did not join the DSA at that point in time. Khamma Sawant was a part of the DSA before that happened. Like, she never denied that. She always said that she was a part of DSA and a part of Socialist Alternative. Many people are a part of both. And some people are a part of the DSA with hopes that maybe they can move some of those people over from the DSA to Socialist Alternative. Some people are a part of DSA because that was during a time when we all still supported the squad, including people like AOC, and we thought that was the right direction to go. So I think there's a big difference between saying that some of the people that are a part of Socialist Alternative are also a part of DSA and saying that the organization as a whole, Socialist Alternative, is trying to move people into the Democratic Party. Those are two different things.
Okay, well, we would probably respectfully disagree on that. The main point that I'm trying to convey in response to your question on Sawant, though, is, again, what does it say about an organization if they've encouraged everybody to join the DSA, which is a part of the Democratic Party, at precisely the moment the DSA is preparing, again, to corral this opposition back into the safe channels of the Democratic Party, back behind the war drive against Russia. It's not even a war drive. It's now basically a confrontation between the US and Russia. So, I mean, setting aside the differences with Kshama Sawant, they're responding to the crisis which is broken out in the DSA. As you said, I think about 12,000 people have left the DSA. So that's a lot of people who, as you were just indicating, there were a lot of people with the best intentions who joined the DSA, thinking that this was going to be the vehicle. It was bound up, as you remember, I'm sure, with the Sanders campaign, et cetera. But after Sanders capitulated to Biden again in 2020, after he did the same thing in 2016, there was a lot of disillusionment. I think what you're seeing now in the DSA, and the fact that they've got to bring in people from the Pentagon to try and whip up support for the war among the DSA's members, is, again, this basic dynamic that the DSA is trying the best that it possibly can, and it's not working very well for them right now. But to take people who are moving in a leftward direction and basically to try and trap them back in the Democratic Party. It's an age-old story. The Democratic Party is a bourgeois party with tremendous levels of political experience and ruthlessness. That's what they're doing now. And what you see in particular on the question of the war with Ukraine is when Ocasio-Cortez and the rest of the squad, as they call themselves, go out and vote to give $40 billion to the Azov battalion. There's a tremendous amount of opposition, I think correct opposition, which has emerged within their organization over that. Now, what would we say in terms of the socialist way to respond? I mean, this just proves again and again, there is no point whatsoever in wasting any energy in working within the Democratic Party, no matter how you want to justify it with an inside-outside, type of justification, as they often do. This is the role that the DSA plays, and it serves to shift the balance of power in the bourgeois political system ever further to the right. This has been the process that's been playing out in the US for the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah, I have seen those things happen with DSA. I haven't seen those things happen with Socialist Alternative, though. And I know several people that are part of Socialist Alternative, and they've actually been told multiple times that we condemn the Democratic Party. So I haven't seen that. Do you have evidence to support that, by the way, that they've been pushing people to join the Democratic Party? I'm just curious.
No, yes, absolutely. So like I said, in 2020, when the Socialist Alternative announced its, and if there's someone who's watching who wants to Google the article that Kayla and I wrote on Workers Strike Back, yes, the Socialist Alternative is basically at the exact moment in 2018, 19, 20, when the crisis within the DSA began to build up. Because keep in mind, when tens of thousands of people joined this organization after, in particular, Ocasio-Cortez was elected, the hopes were very high. Okay, so in this moment, Socialist Alternative joined the DSA, and when you take a political when you make a political decision like that, you take political responsibility for the implications of it. Now everybody is seeing that the DSA is nothing but a faction of the Democratic Party, nothing but a part of the imperialist military and industrial complex. It's crushing the railroad strike. And I think that the effort by Sawant and Socialist Alternative to form a new organization now, like I said, is basically an attempt to distract from the fact that they've just expended a tremendous amount of political capital promoting the democratic socialists of America and giving it left bona fides at precisely the moment when the DSA is in crisis. So if you want more evidence of Sawant's specific role as a Democrat, she's been to Democratic Party fundraisers. I don't want to turn this into I mean, if you want to talk more about Socialist Alternative, I'm happy to. But there's a tremendous amount of evidence of her role as a supporter of the Democratic Party. I think if you want to look at what she said about Ocasio-Cortez and Jayapal in particular, and consider that it's not a question of making a personal judgment on her as an individual, but a political judgment about the perspective which emerges from such decisions like joining the DSA at precisely the moment it's preparing. It's really significant effort to crush the class struggle here and prosecute the interests of American imperialism abroad.
When was that statement made about AOC and Pramila Jayapal? I'm just curious.
If you Google Eric London, Kayla Costa, Socialist Alternative, I'm happy to send the link to you there. All the quotes, all the dates are in there. I think it was from within the last 10 years. It was certainly from the last 10 years. I think it was from the last 5, but you're
okay. But see, that's the problem, Eric. See, this is the thing. Right now it's 2023. Organizations change, people change. I mean, someone can go back years prior and say, Sabrina Salvati once supported Barack Obama, which is no secret. Yes, I did. We all move at our time, right? We move away from certain things. There are a lot of us that supported Obama that would not support a Democrat today. So I think that's why I'm trying to get an idea of how soon this.
You take ownership for it.
Huh?
But you've learned from it. You're proving in what you're saying that that's an experience you went through. Tons of people go through experiences like that.
Right. And she never denied that she did believe in and support AOC and Pramila Jayapal. She's never denied that. A lot of us did back then because we believed that they were going to fight and they were going to do the right thing. But as time has gone by, I watched Kshama Sawant publicly criticize DSA on Twitter recently. Multiple times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Because like I said, they're trying to produce another trap. And so when you have, for example, now let's take the organization Socialist Alternative. This is also an organization that has celebrated the ending of restrictions on the spread of the pandemic in China. This is the Socialist Alternative was attending rallies with imperialist organizations across the United States to celebrate this anti-China hysteria, which the US government is attempting to whip up over the question of the ending of the pandemic. I mean, these things we have to take these organizations. We're not talking about individuals. Individuals, of course, have the right to make mistakes, but political organizations, if they do make mistakes, they have to make an appraisal of them. So if you do tell your entire organization or a substantial portion of it to get behind Pramila Jayapal and Ocasio-Cortez and to join the DSA, and then the DSA supports the suppression of a railroad strike and the illegalization of it and war against Russia, I would just say to your viewers and to you and to anybody else that if that hasn't been explained, and the Workers' Strike Back Initiative there has been no explanation of the catastrophe of Socialist Alternative's entry into the DSA. They're pulling the wool over the eyes of their supporters, and that's not honest politics. That's covering for your past actions. It's not explaining them like you've done with your support for Obama. I mean, so I think that's the differentiation I would make there. I mean, the World Socialist website has been completely right about all of these people. We weren't fooled by Ocasio-Cortez. We weren't fooled by Pramila Jayapal. We aren't fooled by the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We've been opponents of this war since the second it was conjured up in 2014, well, even before then, but in 2014, 2015. We're never backing U.S. State Department promotion of anti-Chinese hysteria. So, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I recognize that there are many people in Socialist Alternative who do really think that they're fighting for socialism. But the point is that I would ask them, then why did their organization support joining the DSA as the DSA is moving to the right? I would ask those questions.
That's an interesting question. I will say they have fought for actions on the ground as well, as like the Fight for 15 in Seattle. That's kind of how I came to know of Socialist Alternative, is because they were fighting for actions on the grounds and for workers' rights, not because of anything to do with the DSA, to be honest with you. But I want to pivot on to this discussion here, because I know you wanted to talk about this as well. Now, there was an article recently that was published by the World Socialist website. It says, "The Rage Against the War Machine Rally, a reactionary political freak show." Now, I know you did not write this. You are not Jacob or Joseph.
I stand by it. So we could talk about it.
Yeah, I was like, I just want to make that clear to people that you didn't write this article. But it seems to appear that the World Socialist website was not in agreement with this rally. Now, I was at this rally. I did cover this event. I even said so when I talked about this on Rising earlier this morning. I do not agree with all the people that were chosen as speakers, but I was not an organizer. So if I wanted to do something different, I can organize my own event. That was my thing. But that didn't stop me or deter me from going to the event. So I do want to ask, why do you specifically disagree with this event?
Okay, good question. And I think if we're both anti-imperialists and we both oppose the escalation of the war, we can have a frank discussion about what the issues involved are here. Because all around the world right now, there is an emerging movement of the working class taking place against the war. It takes place at various levels of understanding. But if you look across Latin America, for example, you look across Asia, even across Western Europe, mass demonstrations, mass strikes taking place over the rising cost of living. If you want to talk about the disastrous impact this war is having on the working class of the world, there was a study in Nature at the end of last year, and I'll get to your point, that said that the impact of the rising cost of fertilizer alone due to the American sanctions is going to kill between 400,000 and 1.1 million people a year, so long as the conflict continues. So the question is, how are we going to build a movement, and what social force is powerful enough to take down American imperialism and all of its allies and vassal states like France and Germany and the United Kingdom? And the answer is the international working class. And it's not, and that is a very different, that's the perspective which the World Socialist website's been fighting for. It's a very different perspective, to be honest, than the perspective which was put forward last weekend in Washington, because you're not going to win over workers in Latin America to join the fight against war by being allied with Jackson Hinkle, who calls for their deportation. You're not going to win support among the working class of the world in an alliance with the Libertarian Party, which wants to have unbridled corporate exploitation. And after all, that's what drives American imperialism. So I think that the questions that really, we're in an extraordinarily dangerous situation. I think you and your viewers recognize that too. Just today, the ending of the pulling out of the START treaty, which was provoked by the Americans and by NATO. I mean, we're headed towards a situation which could be the end of human civilization. But that just means that the questions of political perspective, we're not oriented to the middle class, to disaffected right-wing elements who want to bring Donald Trump back to power. And remember, he was bombing Syria too. He was bombing North Africa too. I'm not presenting Biden as any way to the left of him, really, but he was the one who was talking about fire and fury in North Korea. Jackson Hinkle wants to give him the control of the nuclear codes again. So the main point.
So you don't support the rally because Jackson Hinkle was a speaker?
No, it's not just about him. I mean, look at Tulsi Gabbard. She's not anti-war. She said in 2016 to the Honolulu newspaper that she is a hawk on the question of the war on terror. That I think that is, I don't have the exact month here, but when it comes to the war against terrorists, I'm a hawk. Interview with the Hawaii Tribune Herald. She opposes the release of the prisoners from Guantanamo on the grounds that they'll go back out and fight Americans. Now, it's not just about either. I mean, Ron Paul, you could say 100 things about what horrible positions he's taken over the years. It's not just about this or that individual. It's a question of what is our whole approach to how we're going to change workers' minds. The socialist position is that we're going to go into the working class and we're going to fight to mobilize and build a better understanding of what the factors are involved here, what the historical questions are. That's the way we're going to change workers' minds, not by tailing Trump supporters and fascists. I mean, there were Oath Keepers there. There were Atomwaffen people there. Do you think we're going to win the workers of Latin America to an anti-imperialist movement with people with Pinochet shirts on?
So look, here's the thing. I have to ask, because you keep using the term workers and working class. Who are you trying to unite with that's a part of the working class? Are you saying to exclude certain people with different political ideologies?
Well, no. I mean, the working class is a complete. We're talking about a working class that has 7 billion. There's 7 billion people in it, come from all different sorts of backgrounds. Under capitalism, there's all forms of different confusion, etc. The socialist movement has always fought to explain and to challenge the conceptions that dominate under capitalism. Will Lehman is a member of our movement. He ran for the president of the UAW. We just ran a campaign for the presidency of the United Auto Workers, and he won 5% of the vote on the basis of an anti-imperialist, anti-war program. We won a lot of votes from workers who happen to have also voted for Trump. But we win support for socialism, but that was an explicitly socialist campaign that was run. But we win support for socialism not by adapting ourselves to the right-wing forces that exist and that are part of the political establishment, but by fighting to expose and explain why the fight that workers are undertaking for the rising wage, to elevate wages, over conditions of life, over living conditions, they're not going to be established. They're not going to be met by so long as these right-wing tendencies dominate. They don't dominate, in fact, in the working class. There aren't hundreds of thousands of Proud Boys out there. That's exactly why we feel that the socialist movement has an absolutely necessary, excellent opportunity to change workers' minds. So that's not going to be done by adapting to those far-right forces. It's not.
Okay, couple of things. One, it seems like you were okay getting votes from Trump supporters, but you don't want them at this rally. Two,
those workers.
Well, wait a minute. Let me finish. Two, I can assure you, especially here in Massachusetts, if you go out to some of these mill towns where they still have factories and manufacturing, there are a lot of right-wing working class people. And three, you mentioned Latin America, and I want to be very specific about that, because a lot of the organizing and uniting that's happened, at least in the global South, has been over the economic issues, not the social issues. We've covered that on the show multiple times. So you have people who may consider themselves to be left-wing, may consider themselves to be more conservative in the global South. But where they come together is on those economic issues. You look at countries like Denmark, you look at countries like Germany, look at countries like the UK, you look at countries like France. The reason why they're able to get 50,000 people out in the streets is over the economic issues. So you can have 50,000 people in Denmark come out in the streets and protest and say, hey, you're taking a holiday away from us. Oh, and by the way, you are not going to give more aid, more military aid to the military industrial complex. All of those people are not on the left. When you look at the real anti-war movement that we had in this country back during the Vietnam protests, all those protesters were not on the left. So I'm really confused here, because I think it sounds like you want to have a class movement, but you want certain people excluded from the movement. And that's not how organizing works when you're trying to organize over economic issues. Look at someone like Chris Smalls, who organized the workers at the Amazon warehouse. What if Chris Smalls would have said, no, all of you guys who are Trump supporters, you can't be a part of this. I'm only going to organize the people who are on the left. It would have fallen apart. So you can't have a class movement, Eric, by isolating certain people. And when it comes to an anti-war movement, yes, you can unite with people over that particular issue. That doesn't mean they agree with you on every other issue. There were people out there marching with us in the streets over the George Floyd incident, for the George Floyd protest, that did not agree with me on Medicare for all, did not agree with me on canceling student loan debt, but they agreed with me on that one issue. If you're going to look for people who agree with you on every single particular issue, you are not going to have a mass movement in this country. I'm sorry, I have to push back on that.
All right, that's fine, but I'll push back on what you've just said, because look, it's not the way that you're presenting it, I would say, is wrong, because it's not just a question of the socialist movement doesn't take the level at which workers currently are as the end all be all. Okay, now you have a rally over the weekend. You invite people who are Nazis, not you personally inviting them, but there was a rally that was held. Chris Hedges, who had once presented himself as someone who
we have to stop there. There was no, wait a minute, there were no Nazis that were speakers at that rally. I was at the rally. There were no Nazis that were speakers at that rally. So you need to clarify.
No, I'm not clarifying. There was a substantial presence of far right elements, including people like the well, okay, you want to talk about who? What about Jackson Hinkle? Who were the people who were calling the shots that he was referencing? This is
You're saying, wait a minute. I think you need to be very careful here, Eric. You are making a statement on this show that people are watching live, and you're saying that Jackson Hinkle is a Nazi?
Look, this was an event which was held explicitly with open arm. What I was just about to say was that Chris Hedges wrote an article talking about how Oath Keepers and Proud Boys would be welcome at this event. He said that. I think it was actually in a statement he made subsequent to the initial article. Now, what he said is actually very interesting, because this gets to the heart of the issue that you're raising. Hedges said the following. He said, "We will not topple corporate power and the war machine alone. There has to be a left-right coalition which will include people whose opinions are not only unpalatable, but even repugnant." And then he says, or we will remain marginalized and ineffectual. And then he says the following. He says, "Because we urgently need as many voices as possible from a broad variety of perspectives to speak out so that we can be much more effective at pressuring Congress and the White House to move this conflict from the bloody battlefield to the negotiating table." Look, this conflict is not going to end because of pressure on Joe Biden. It's going to end if there's a movement in the working class based on socialist, anti-imperialist principles. And to the extent that there are those out there who do not realize that that's in their class interest, then it's the obligation of the socialist movement to fight for that and to explain that. And no, not to adapt to people like Jackson Hinkle, who call for the mass deportation of immigrant workers. What a horrific betrayal of the interests of the international working class it is.
Look, I read that article.
He somehow left anti-war. When you appeal to someone like that and call him anti-war, you legitimize the far right, and they will come next.
Listen, I read that article by Chris Hedges. I have many criticisms about Jackson Hinkle. This is not a secret, but I think it is a stretch. You have to be careful when you come onto this show and you explicitly call him a Nazi.
You think
No. There's a difference between Chris Hedges' article and Chris. There's a difference between Chris Hedges' article and Chris Hedges saying, "I openly welcome certain people to this event," and you explicitly saying that Jackson Hinkle is a Nazi. I think you need to be careful with that.
How do you think it impacts the ability of the anti-war movement in the United States to explain that the Ukrainian government is filled with Banderaites who are Nazis? How do you think it helps the anti-war movement when then you associate with fascists like Jackson Hinkle? All right.
So listen, I have many criticisms, as I've stated before, even before the rally and after. I was not an organizer for this rally. There are certain speakers that I myself would have not invited. I just had that conversation earlier this morning on Rising. Okay, I was not an organizer for this, but I will say this. I think you have to be very careful when you make those kind of statements and you don't have any evidence to back that up, Eric. That's what I'm saying.
No evidence when someone is a supporter of Donald Trump and talks about purging liberalism and globalists. I mean, you're just defending them.
Okay, no, listen, Eric, wait a minute, Eric. I know several people, Eric, I know several, wait a minute now. I know several people that supported Donald Trump. Wait a minute. I know several people who voted for Obama twice and then turned around and voted for Donald Trump. Not everyone who supported Trump is a Nazi. Do not come on here with that rhetoric. Don't do it.
Listen to this. When we campaign in the working class, we talk to people with a lot of different ideas. Okay, we talk to people who voted for Obama. We talk to people who voted for Trump. And we don't adapt to either one of those like you're adapting to people like Jackson Hinkle.
I'm not adapting to anybody. First of all, you don't know. Wait a minute. You don't know what you're talking about. I have had many.
If you're associated with people like
that, I have had many
movement because they're not war.
Eric, I have had many criticisms of Jackson Hinkle. This is not a secret. What you are doing just a couple minutes ago, you told me it was not about the speakers or the personalities, but you keep bringing up the speakers and the personalities. So that's really what it was about. Let me tell you something. There was a march for Medicare for all. There was a march for Medicare for all 2 years ago in 50 cities across this country that I was a part of. And the same thing you're doing right now, wait a minute, the same thing that you're doing right now is the exact same thing.
Getting rid of all social.
Eric, I'm going to ask you to let me speak. The same thing that you're doing right now is the exact same thing that people did in reference to that event. They criticized some of the speakers. They criticized the fact that there were people who agreed with Medicare for all, who were not lefties. There were people who were conservative. One of the speakers, Dr. Joseph Jarvis, who is a conservative, supports Medicare for all. And he's spoken about this publicly multiple times because he's done the data and the math. There are people who organized those events who were heavily criticized and attacked because there were people that were a part of those marches that were not leftists. When we ask for Medicare for all, that doesn't just mean give it to people on the left. It's for everybody. Everyone in this country needs health care. So what I'm trying to say to you, Eric, is as an activist and as an organizer, I've heard these criticisms with every single event that has been organized by some people on the left and other people who are not politically involved at all. There's always these attacks. Who's the speaker? Who's the this? Who's the blah? And what I'm trying to say to you is this, is that we do not have an anti-war movement in this country right now. We have not had one as large since the Vietnam War protests. You are not going to have a massive anti-war movement in this country if you only want lefties to be a part of it. Because guess what, Eric? Some of the lefties don't even call themselves anti-war anymore, and they are actually for this war in Russia and Ukraine. That is what I'm trying to get you to understand. If you have issues and criticisms, with Jackson Hinkle, you take that up with Jackson Hinkle.
I have no interest in that. What I'm saying is the way to build a movement that is capable of taking down American imperialism is to fight for a socialist perspective in the international working class. It's got to be international. And you're never, ever in a million years going to be able to build a movement with such vile nationalists like the people who are on that stage. They are not anti-war. They are not anti-war.
Who's the nationalist?
Oh, come on. I mean, you don't think MAGA communism constitutes nationalism?
Listen, I've said it again. You keep bringing up Jackson Hinkle, but you keep saying it's not about Jackson Hinkle. And that's really what this is about for you, Eric. So my advice is this. As I've said before, I have many criticisms of Jackson Hinkle, which I've discussed before on the show and has been discussed with him face to face. And I think the difference is, if I had organized this event, like I said, there are some people that I personally would not have invited. I did not organize the event, but I'm not going to let the fact that maybe I don't agree with one of the speakers from stopping me from attending the event. We need to stop a nuclear war from happening. We need to stop World War III from happening. And right now, I really ain't got time for the purity test, Eric. I really don't have time for it. This is a life or death situation. So none of this matters. You understand? Jackson Hinkle, all these other people that you are attacking, that you're criticizing, that you have issues with, all this whole thing about who you can work with, who you can't work with. At the end of the day, none of it matters if we are all dead because of a nuclear war.
Well, the way that you're proceeding isn't going to stop that. You've only legitimized the far right.
Well, then you know what, Eric? You go ahead and you organize your own rally.
As we have been on the World Socialist website.
Eric, I employ you. I employ you to organize your own rally that only consists of socialists.
No, as you can find out on the World Socialist website, and all your viewers can as well. The World Socialist website and the International Committee of the Fourth International have been organizing anti-war demonstrations against this war in every single country where we have sections. We're proud of it. We're proud that we have not done so while legitimizing fascists, as the organization that you're a part of has done this last weekend. And we have a very different
organization. I'm not a part of this org. What are you talking about?
The Rage Against the War Machine event.
That's not an organization, Eric. It's an event.
All right. Well, it certainly presented a perspective of propping up the far right. And those of your viewers who are interested in fighting against imperialism, you got to do it with people who are anti-war, and that isn't what happened last weekend.
Okay, and good luck with finding a massive movement like that on the left. Eric, thank you so much for your time. I really do implore you to take that conversation up with Jackson Hinkle, but seriously, you need to be careful. You need to be careful about coming onto people's shows and saying things like so-and-so is a Nazi, and you don't have something to back that up.
I think I did. I think I did back it up.
Okay. All right. Eric, thank you so much for your time.
I do appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
All righty. Jesus. Welcome, guys. Jeez Louise. Oh my God. Like I said before multiple times, I've had many criticisms about Jackson Hinkle, but you have to be very careful when you make those kind of statements about people. You have to be very careful. What's up, Eric? Okay, I'll go to the comments. I'm sorry, Eric. Jeez Louise. No, man. Because next thing you know, people will be like, guess what happened? This person said on Sabby's show. Like, you just have to be careful with that. We're moving on. In Balloons We Trust. Sabby's such a hard worker. At least 3 streams today. Yes, it's been a busy day. Balloons. I love that. Shout out to my comrade JB, says, hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Terry, Sabby, you rocked at the rally rising in RBN. Thank you so much. Thanks for the super chat. I'm gonna go through the super chats now. Thank you, Sam. What socialist policy on unions? I've always been open to unite where needed to meet material gains for workers, not divide each other by ideology. That's a good question. Eric, let's leave that one starred because I want to come back to that one. Thank you for the super sticker, Aberdeen. Thank you for the super chat, Eric. Sabby is working class, 100%. Keep doing the good work that you do. I'm more so middle class now. I want to clarify that because some people be like, she's not working class anymore. Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. Eric wants to be a small cult leader. I don't know what's happening, man. Like, look, it sounds like to me, like, obviously people need to have some conversations with Jackson Hinkle, but this is not the place to do it. Thank you for the super chat, Meteor Dream. Sabby, you have my complete respect. You go, girl. Thank you, NK. I'm with you, Sabby, not this clown. Damn. Thank you for this super chat. Not enough cereal. That's an interesting name. Questioning if this Eric London is acting in good faith. It seems like he's pushing the same guilt by association BS. Thank you, Christian. I'll pay you $5 to remove the CIA plant from the World Socialist website. Eric off the show. Jesus. And be careful with that too as well. Thank you, Cryosynth. I'm curious, is Eric London considered a fair representative of socialism? Is this what it is about? Oh, God. We are doing call-in tonight, by the way. Thank you, Delthea. Sabby cut his mic. This is your show, not his. Thank you, Lorez. He wants Rev only if they pass his purity test. This is one of the criticisms that people have had about the left. JB and I are going to have a talk about this on the JB and Sabby show Thursday. Thank you, Meteor Dreams. Also disappointed in Franco Espeleta. He completely trashed the rally. He had a panel to defend his positions. I used to like Frank analysis. I mean, I knew how Franco felt about the rally, but I mean, Franco, you know, he's talked to us about that as well. Thank you for the chat, Cortez. Jackson and Jimmy Dore were in the Medicare for All rally in LA. I was there. Where were you, Eric? Sheesh. Not enough cereal. Thank you. He's pushing the don't collaborate with these people line. Something stinks here. My money's on this guy's and op. Thank you, Philosophical Thirst Worms. The way to build a movement is from the person who has never built a movement. The Pop Funko Poindexter left at it again. Thank you, Marvin. Build movement, no nation, world. You ain't got nothing. Thank you, Psyop Shorty. Psyop Shorty. Get him, Sabby. Thank you, NK. Reading all these books made him dumb. Should have gotten out there and actually talked to people. He'd be more in touch. Thank you, Laugh. Sabby, you keeping me up late, girl. Oh, that's right. I think you're abroad. Roger, he's subjecting himself to defamation. You have to be careful. You have to be really careful. Did you notice in the beginning? That's why I tried to push back on that. You got to be careful. And thank you for this, the King. The clip where Jackson talks about blood and soil is him criticizing a Russian liberal for wanting Russia to lose. Maybe bad phrasing on his part, but not at all evidence that he's a Nazi. You gotta be careful about these statements, man. I ain't trying to have it. Like, you guys ain't coming back here and being like, guess what? Because I didn't say any of that. I'll be very clear. I'll take the comments on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for the tip, Dominic. The assumed reason for a political party is for its members to have political power after elections. If its members have no political power after elections, the leaders of the party end up collecting donations for themselves. The independentvoterparty.org shows voters how to have political power after elections. It does not solicit donations of any kind. Thank you for mentioning that organization. Someone else has mentioned that to me actually at the rally. And thank you for this tip as well. The working class can end wars quickly. However, they need to learn how to replace those that start and fund wars first. The Independent Voter Party organization is seeking candidates for office in all levels of government that will accept constituent polling, that will give their constituents voting power every day they are in office to represent them. If you have time, Eric, if we can put that link to that in the chat. And thank you for the tip, Scott. Eric doesn't know if Jackson Hinkle won't see it Sabby's way eventually. Eric not wanting to speak with Jackson sounds like Sam Cedar not wanting to talk to Jimmy when Bree offered. Good for you, Sabby. Thank you so much for that. Whoosh. And thank you for this tip as well, Scott. I meant Jink, not Sam Cedar. Okay, thank you. Ay. What else are we talking about tonight? Let's go ahead and get into it. Jesus. Here's that magical thumbnail. All right. Tonight, we are discussing Ro Khanna runs cover. Yes, this is going back to the incident in East Palestine, Ohio. What does Ro Khanna have to say about this issue? And of course, Pete has issued a statement as well. We also are going to discuss Rage Against the War rally recap. And I'm also going to discuss Don Lemon fail. And of course, Eric London was just here to talk about DSA issues and other issues as well. I did not expect it to get that heated. I'll go back. I'll come to those right after this first clip. Okay, Eric. All right, let's get started here. And I'll shout out patrons at the end. Let's get started here with this clip. Now, Max Blumenthal shared this clip. And this is actually the mayor of East Palestine. Someone help me. I've heard it said both ways. Some people are saying East Palestine. Some people say East Palestine. If you live in that area, let me know. Anywho, here is the mayor, Trent Conaway. And we're actually going to get his take on this and how he feels about, in a sense, like, I think the people in his town feel abandoned right now. Let's get started with this.
Yeah, I think he has to prove himself to you. And Mayor, before we let you go, you saw President Joe Biden over in Ukraine. Did that make you feel slighted in any way? I mean, he hasn't really. Can he not hear me?
I got you, Trent. He asked, before we go, I can repeat. He said, with the president being in Ukraine today, did that surprise you?
Absolutely. That was the biggest slap in the face. That tells you right now he doesn't care about us. So
agreed.
He can send every agency he wants to, but I found that out this morning in one of the briefings that he was in the Ukraine giving millions of dollars away to people over there, not to us. And I'm furious.
On President's Day in our country.
Yeah, President's Day in our country. He's over in Ukraine, so that tells you what kind of guy he is.
All right. Well, listen, you two hang in there. Please let us know if we can do anything. And I'm glad.
You ain't gonna do nothing. Anyway, they came with that. Please let me know if we can do anything. Y'all ain't gonna do anything. That was the mayor. And it makes him feel a certain type of way that Joe Biden was over in Ukraine instead of there to meet with the people that are affected by basically a chemical disaster. They don't feel safe going back to their homes. They don't feel like they can breathe the air. The water is still contaminated, apparently, based on the videos that I've seen. They have every right to be angry. That's right. Brandy says, I will be pissed too. Exactly. So these people, they don't know if they can go home or not. They don't know what to do. And where's the president of the United States? This reminds me of Hurricane Katrina. When people were asking that same question. Now, different president, different political party. It was a Republican president at that point in time. But the similar situation where people in Katrina felt like they were abandoned by the federal government. You had people stranded for days waiting on some type of support from FEMA or for the federal government to jump in and help them. There were celebrities like Tim McGraw. There were celebrities who went down to help those people in Louisiana before the president even showed up. That's right, Terry. Flint, Michigan, too. Same thing. These people feel abandoned and they feel forgotten about. Now, Khanna was interviewed about this recently. Shout out to Case Study QB for this particular clip. And I want you to hear Khanna's take on this because, of course, he's going to find a way to point fingers at the right. But that's interesting because they're not the ones that are in power right now at this time. Listen to this.
Showing as far as the air. I would be alert and concerned, but I think I would probably be back in my house.
That is actually the resounding advice from state officials, by the way. Just buy some bottled water when you get back home. But residents of East Palestine say many of them are on welfare. They rely on programs like SNAP, commonly known as food stamps, to get the food and the bottled water that they need.
That's important for people to understand because I know there have been some people saying like, well, most of the people in that town are white. Yes. But they're also working class or poor. Like she just told you, most of the people in that town rely on some form of welfare. Told you, they don't care about poor people. They don't care about working class people. If something like this would have happened in Beverly Hills, there would have been a response right away. This wouldn't even be up for discussion because rich people, all they got to do is make a couple phone calls and they can knock this right out of the park. They would not tolerate this. Let's go on.
And in an emergency like this, those are exactly the sorts of programs you might expect to fall back on. The social safety net is meant to help low-income communities, particularly when they are facing heightened health risks and food scarcity. And that is why it is so surprising that as this crisis unfolds, Republicans in Washington are seriously suggesting slashing those very same programs so they can decrease the federal debt limit. House Republicans are considering adding stricter work requirements to the National Food Stamps program and reducing aid to low-income adults without children. That is all in addition to the impending reduction of monthly SNAP allotments by $82 on average, which starts.
So they're saying here, Republicans take aim at food stamps in growing fight over federal debt. But the problem is here, again, when you look at the poverty issue that we have in this country, if we didn't have such a high poverty issue, if we didn't have this issue, they wouldn't even have to depend on welfare or snaps. They wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. Now, you see how they're trying to make this a left-right. They're trying to make it a left-right issue instead of holding people like Joe Biden account for not even visiting the town, choosing to visit Ukraine instead. Last I saw, Erin Brockovich is on her way there. Again, this is not someone in political office at this point in time. Not in political office at this point in time. Instead of trying to hold Pete Buttigieg accountable, which he issued a statement I'm going to show you in just a second because now he realized he had to say something because he's been getting pressured by people. Let's try to pivot this a little bit and blame it on the right so that we don't have to point fingers at Joe Biden, because we are MSNBC and we are going to support the Democratic Party. That's how this goes.
Next month. Republicans like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio are incensed by what is happening in East Palestine, Ohio right now. And at the same time, they are sharpening their knives for a program that would help people buy bottled water in an emergency just like this one. Joining us now is Congressman Ro Khanna, the Democrat from California, who sits on the House Agriculture and Oversight and Reform Committees. Congressman Khanna, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for covering me.
Well, this is really important because I think we often don't see the connection between, urging residents to buy bottled water, in a moment of real vulnerability, and then also cutting programs like food stamps, which are meant to help the most vulnerable among us. I mean, can Democrats make this argument? Because it seems like Republicans are trying to get some sort of mileage out of this, political mileage, if you will, out of this train crash in terms of their attacks on the Democratic governor of the state.
So she's talking about political mileage. I want to take this time to tell you guys, like the stream. Don't forget to do that. CJ does this so much better than I do. He's so smoother at it. I'm just going to be honest. I just pause and I'm all kind of awkward and I'm like the stream. I don't know. Anywho, now they're going to focus on the Republican aspect of this. But again, notice how they don't focus on the fact when you're talking about, well, these people may have their benefits cut. We should be asking, why do those people have to be on welfare to begin with? Why are they in those economic situations where they have to have that help in order to buy food? Capitalism has failed. It has failed. And no, welfare is not a new thing. But welfare was supposed to be like this temporary solution. People get back on their feet and then they don't have to. But why do people have to be on it? What are these jobs paying people? Not a living wage, apparently. That's why they need some type of assistance. Now, of course, it's going to be politicized because that's how the United States work on particular issues. It is going to be politicized, especially when we're heading into an election year. Listen to what Ro Khanna says.
Alex, what's sad is that this has turned into a political football. I mean, what's happening to the people in East Palestine is horrific. It's one of the largest environmental disasters. These are working class folks, almost 70% in poverty, as you pointed out. Many face deindustrialization, jobs going offshore. And what we have to do as a country is come together to support the programs you mentioned so that people have assistance, to support making sure that these roads are safe, that we are holding corporate railroads accountable with safe laws and emergency brakes. And we, instead of throwing punches at each other in a partisan way, I mean, let's focus on the people there who are suffering.
If you want to focus on the people there who are suffering, shouldn't you be asking why the president isn't there? Has there been a state of emergency? Like, the water doesn't just affect the people in East Palestine or Palestine, Ohio. The Ohio River crosses through multiple states. So the surrounding states, those people in those towns that are on those borders, they could also be affected. Where is the national emergency?
It seems like the Republican Party, setting the train saga aside, understands that it has a problem when it comes to their stance on social safety net problems. I mean, writ large, there is a debate about how public the GOP can be with their intention to slash social safety net programs. You have Donald Trump out there saying it's, Rick Scott should not be talking about the slashing of Social Security and Medicare. We're not going to talk about the sunsetting of entitlement programs. It's a bad idea. Let's not do that. Bad news for Rick Scott of Florida. There will be no cuts. I mean, Trump seems to understand the reality of this. He knows the people of East Palestine. They voted for him. I think 71% of the residents there voted for Trump. And yet, there's a parallel universe in which the party, especially in Washington, continues forward trying to do the very thing that they say they're not trying to do. Do you think that hypocrisy comes home to roost as they try and slash SNAP ahead of the passage of the Farm Bill?
I do. Look, Alex, there's a reason Donald Trump won the presidency and Mitt Romney didn't. What Donald Trump tried to do is he realized that the Republicans needed to win the working class. Well, you can't be a working class party when you're for cutting the very benefits to the working class.
I can say the same thing about the Democratic Party, too. The Democratic Party is also not for the working class. If they were for the working class, they would have at least passed the $15 minimum wage. And it was the Democrats. Yeah, of course, the Republicans were going to vote against it, but it could have passed if the other Democrat senators would have approved it, and they voted against it. 7 Democrats voted against it, and 1 independent voted against it. So the Democratic Party isn't for the working class either. That's the thing. This is Ro Khanna saying the talking points that he needs to say in order to back and cover Joe Biden. And we need to really look at another situation here. The fact that Joe Biden has not visited East Palestine, Ohio at this point in time, what that says to you and what you need to pay attention to is the fact that Ohio is no longer seen as a winnable state for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has thrown their hands up in the air and has accepted the fact that Ohio, which was a swing state, is now most likely going to continue to vote Republican. So they've given up on the votes from the state. So they've given up on the people. It's a sad state of affairs, but it's a complete reality, you guys. This is how politics works. They know they don't have your votes. So you guys can wait. I'm going to go overseas, meet with the people I need to meet with there. And then when I get back, we'll see about maybe me possibly stopping by. But since I know that your state is going to vote red anyway, you are not a sense of urgency to me.
And now there are people in the Congress who are saying slash Social Security, slash Medicare, slash the programs that would help people in East Palestine. And I think you've got Donald Trump looking at this saying they're committing political suicide. A lot of the policies that he rejected of Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney to try to fashion a more working class constituency are ones that the extreme wing in the House and Senate aren't in agreement with. And that, I think, would be a political disaster for them in these battleground states.
So what you're witnessing right now is Ro Khanna running cover for the Democratic Party. That's what you're witnessing.
I have to ask you, Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert co-authored a letter about, again, food stamp SNAP, and I want to read you a selection from it. As the United States approaches the brink of untenable debt levels, I write to urge you to work with the U.S. Congress to enact work requirements as a feature of welfare reform. These incentives will prevent the condemnation of SNAP beneficiaries to a life of dependency. Instead, incentives will restore their dignity. Work requirements for able-bodied adults promote community engagement and a transition to self-sufficiency. Breaking this poverty trap will help future generations avoid welfare programs altogether. I mean, this is the age-old dignity argument about getting people off the social safety net. That Republicans, I'm old enough to remember when this is Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan's primary argument for governing. Are you surprised to see the Gaetzes and Boeberts of the party embracing this? And what do you think that portends for, future legislative sessions where they've shown to have so much power in Kevin McCarthy's caucus?
They do have power, and it's a substantive mistake. It's a political mistake. Alex, it's important to realize they are work requirements in a lot of the SNAP benefits. That was, like it or not, Bill Clinton's reforms to a lot of the welfare in the 1990s. Now, some of the liberals opposed them, but those work requirements are there. And this idea that you have people just getting SNAP benefits without having to do job training programs, without having to actually seek employment is just not true. This is a myth from Ronald Reagan's welfare queens that plays on the worst racial stereotypes, and it's factually false. And I don't think it's winning politics. The big divide in this country is, are you a party for the working class? Do you understand that many Americans can't afford to live in America? They can't afford childcare. They can't afford health care. They can't afford education. And are you going to help them, or are you going to be just for the elite? And
so, Ro Khanna, why does the Democratic Party continue to also not be a part of the working class? Why does the Democratic Party continue to hold back the working class as well? Because both parties are corporate. So let's not sit here and pretend like it's just the Republican Party that's not a part of the working class. The Democratic Party left the working class a long time ago. A long time ago. And I want to remind you, this goes back to the issue of what happened with the train derailment and the chemical disaster in East Palestine. Now, Pete has issued a statement. Now, this was on Good Morning America. I'm going to play part of this Because I honestly tell you, I think that somebody went to Pete and said, look, you need to handle this, because he was quiet for a while. Days had went by and people in that town were trying to figure out if it was safe for them, whether or not they can go back to their town. Can't even drink the water. So Pete has something to say now. Now watch this. This is going to be interesting to you if you haven't seen it.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us this morning. You know, you've got two real big missions right now, helping the people on the ground in East Palestine right now, preventing something like this from happening again. What is the administration doing on both fronts?
That's right. So one of the biggest things to support the people of East Palestine is to make sure that they have access to the public health support they need, to the environmental resources they need. That's why the EPA Administrator, Michael Regan, will be on the ground there again, and why CDC is going out there. But there's another side to the story, which is making sure that we move forward on rail safety in this country. The NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, is an independent body, and they are independently doing their investigative work.
Moving forward with rail safety in this country, isn't that exactly what the railroad workers were trying to tell you back when that legislation came through Congress? One of the complaints that they had were the safety regulations, that they had cut back on the safety regulations. The railroad workers tried to tell you about this, and you guys in Congress voted to prevent these people from getting 7 days of sick leave. They tried to talk about this. So the damage that you see that's happening in East Palestine, Ohio, this is on their hands. That's right. All of you in Congress that voted against, this is on your hands. Your hands. How do you feel about those votes now? I noticed some people are very quiet. Very quiet. Some of the people who were actively defending, well, it wasn't going to pass anyway. Well, the plan was to get it as two separate things, even though they knew it wasn't going to pass in the Senate. Listen, these people had every right to go on strike. And I say it again. They had every right to go on strike. The job is not safe. A lot of silence. A lot of them. They were very defensive. And they're really quiet right now. I should reach out to the railroad workers and see if I can get them to come back on to ask them how they feel about this. Let's continue.
But we don't have to wait for their final report to know that some things need to change. And so today, we are pushing forward a three-part drive on rail safety. Things that we're doing at the Department of Transportation to raise the bar, things that we need help from Congress to do in order to hold rail companies accountable, and things that this industry needs to do differently.
Congress to hold railroad companies accountable, but they just didn't do that, Pete. They just did not do that.
I got to tell you, ever since I came into this job, I have seen the power that multi-billion-dollar railroad companies wield, and they fight safety regulations tooth and nail. That's got to change. The future cannot be like the past, and I am calling for that change to begin right away.
You're beginning.
It could have begun when the railroad workers were threatening to go on strike. It could have begun then, Pete. It could have begun then. This is why people kind of quiet. I really think this is why Joe Biden is ducking and like, oh, I'm not going to go visit them, because do you see the problem? Like, this could have already happened. This could have already been a done deal. God. What a slap in the face.
Saying it should begin right away, but Ohio Senator J.D. Vance has said that the administration was loosening rail regulations.
No, I'm happy to talk with him more if he wants to understand the work that we're doing. For example, we are advancing the requirement on two-person crews on trains. Believe it or not, the rail industry has been pushing to be allowed to have trains have only one human being on board. Imagine what happens.
Why do you say believe it or not, Pete? That's exactly what the railroad workers said. That's exactly what they complained about. They said they decreased the number of people on the train. So here comes Pete and he says, believe it or not. No, we do believe it because we listen to the workers. You guys did not. It just, oh my God. The PR talking points on this, you guys.
Happens if there's an issue on a train that's a mile long or longer, and there's only one person to check on something 3/4 of the way back in the train. Now, the last administration froze that rulemaking. We have been advancing that in order to push safety. We have been working to make sure that we have more authority to hold rail companies accountable. And so one thing that Senator Vance and others in Congress could do to help would be to give us more teeth by raising the fines. Right now, even for the most egregious kind of safety violation, like ones involving hazardous materials that result in fatalities, Congress has passed a statute that caps our ability to fine at about $250,000. And that might sound like a lot of money for somebody going through daily life, but to a multi-billion-dollar company like Norfolk Southern, it is dust. So I'm urging Congress to do things like work with us to raise the fines, work with us on fortifying tank cars. Under the Obama administration, a rule went into effect calling for a stronger type of tank car to be fully rolled out across the industry by 2025. That got pushed back by an act of Congress to 2029.
Administration's coming.
Congress.
He's asking Congress to please work with him. He's asking, no, Pete, you can't ask them. You need to go in and demand it. Why do you even have to ask? Why did it take this incident happening for people to fully wake up and see, oh, damn, maybe those railroad workers were right. Maybe we should have supported them. Maybe we should have allowed them to go ahead and go on strike. You think just because you increase the fines, that's going to prevent these companies from doing what they're doing? These companies are rich. BlackRock owns part of that railroad company. You think a fine is going to seriously hurt them? The company didn't even show up to the town hall. The mayor of East Palestine had a town hall. They didn't even show up. They didn't even show up. But Pete, you can't really talk about holding corporations accountable because you had no problem taking corporate money. Remember that speech he gave in 2020? Some of them feel like if we don't go all the way over to the edge, that we're not doing enough. Yeah, Pete, you're not doing enough. I still remember that from the debates. We're not going all the way over. Yeah. So how are you going to say this now? You support the corporations. You were totally happy to take corporate money. You in bed with these people. Now you got to lie with these people.
To work with us to move that date back up, but also the rail industry can do that without us making them. And I hope they will make that change while we simultaneously work on the regulation.
The administration's
hope. He hopes they do it. Can't the president of the United States demand this?
come under some fire for its response. The mayor of East Palestine has said it took nearly 2 weeks for the White House to contact him. There were shouts of "Where's Pete Buttigieg?" at a town hall meeting last week. What's your response to that? When are you going to go to East Palestine?
Well, I am planning to go, and our folks were on the ground from the first hour.
When, Pete?
Hours. I do want to stress that the NTSB needs to be able to do its work independently. But when I go, the focus is going to be on action. Look, I was mayor of my hometown for 8 years. We dealt with a lot of disasters, natural and human. And one of the things I noticed very quickly is that there's two kinds of people who show up when you have that kind of disaster experience. People who are there because they have a specific job to do and are there to get something done, and people who are there to look good and have their picture taken. When I go, it will be about action on rail safety, like the actions that we are calling on Congress to help us with, that we're calling on industry to take, and that we are undertaking ourselves as a department to help make sure that these kinds of things don't happen in the future.
The question that he did ask is, when do you plan to go? Pete didn't tell you when. He just goes, when I go. Why haven't you been there yet, Pete? Why haven't you been there? It's been a couple of weeks. You haven't been? That right there lets you know this whole when I plan to go. He don't know. He don't know when he planned to go. Let me go to some of these comments here. Jeez Louise, when the coast air is clear. question. How do you not know? Thank you for the super chat, Delthea. Sabby has to protect her show. Yo, because seriously, first thing someone will say is, did you hear that Sabby called you a this on the show? Nope. No. Thank you for the super chat, Cool Blue. I am glad for Rage Rally. That needed to happen. Continue. Anyone objects, move on and keep moving forward. Thank you for the super chat, Yep X. I had to more or less stay out of this Rage Against the War Machine rally on Twitter. It is and was a huge divisive issue when it shouldn't be. Lost some followers too. The WWS lost some of my respect for that rally hit piece article. Yeah. Thank you for the super chat, Donnie. Ohio is a big swing state, so Biden will have to explain this to people in Ohio in 2024. I think they've already given up on trying to win it again, Donnie. She's black. FYI, Obama cut SNAP benefits when he was in office. See? Thank you for the super chat, Tom. That wouldn't happen in Beverly Hills because the railroad would never be allowed to run there in the first place. Great point, Tom. Thanks for the super chat, Delthea. I knew when Biden went overseas with people suffering here, it was going to blow up in Biden's face. Yet another bonehead move. Thank you, Cool Blue. Is Biden not showing up in Ohio partly because the state is no longer a bellwether and has realigned to the Republicans? That's what I was saying. If this happened in Pennsylvania or Michigan, both now top bellwethers, Biden would have showed. That's a good point. Didn't he show up there pretty quickly when that bridge collapsed in Pennsylvania? Thank you for the super chat, YepX. Last week, I went to a church food pantry. All they gave everyone was a bag of rotten apples, an overripe pineapple, and small bag of onions. And what are you going to do with that? Thank you for the super chat, Delthea. Mayor Pete wanted the position of Secretary of Transportation, not the job of Secretary of Transportation. Ineptitude, thy name is Pete. And thank you for this, Rye 5. Sabby, a quick wiki search said East Palestine is named after the Middle Eastern region of Palestine. Okay, East Palestine. I've heard people call it two different things. That's why I was like, I don't know. All right, you guys know we have been featuring Black History spotlights on the show for this month. I missed a couple of days because I was out of town, but this one is a little bit different. But I think those of you who, some of you may remember this individual, and I don't usually talk about athletes for this, but this story is particularly interesting, and this is someone that I do think that you should know about. So tonight's quick feature is none other than Mr. Walter Payton. Now, if you are not familiar with Walter Payton, he does have a pretty interesting story. He wasn't just an NFL player. This is someone that I think you need to know more about. Every year, there is an award that the NFL distributes to a player, and it's called the Walter Payton Award. And there's a reason why this award is given out. And so I want to go ahead and start with this video clip here about Walter Payton, just to give you, this is like 1 minute and 25 seconds, just to give you a little brief history about him. And then I'm going to show you a clip of an announcement that Walter Payton made before he passed away that really changed the game.
Payton set an NCAA record of 464 points scored in his collegiate career. Nicknamed Sweetness, Walter Payton was one of the NFL's greatest rushers. He played 13 seasons with the Chicago Bears from 1975 to 1987. Peyton set records that players are still trying to reach today. Peyton's undeniable talent made him one of the game's greatest. Since his death, the NFL honors a league player each year with the Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year Award for volunteer and charity work and outstanding performance on the field. The Walter Payton Award is also awarded to the most outstanding offensive player in the Division I Football Championship subdivision of college football. Walter Sweetness Payton will always be remembered as one of the greatest players in football history.
That's right. That's right. Super Bowl Shuffle, baby. You got it, Jay. That's right. He was a part of the Chicago Bears back during their Super Bowl Shuffle days. So if you've never seen that video, just go on YouTube. I can't play it on here because of copyright, but the Chicago Bears actually had a music video and it was called the Super Bowl Shuffle. It was actually pretty interesting. But that's what a lot of people know about Walter Payton. But I do want you to understand that something did happen with Walter Payton that I think we should bring more of an issue to. He did have a health issue, a serious health issue. And my dad was the one who mentioned that announcement to me. So let's listen to this.
And our top story is the health of Walter Payton.
His friends, his teammates, fans all call him Sweetness, but there is no sugarcoating the fact that Payton is now facing the challenge of his life. At a news conference today, Walter and his doctor explained that the Bear great has been placed on the waiting list for a liver transplant. Payton had no peer on the playing field, becoming the greatest ground gainer in NFL history. That determination should be an asset in fighting this rare disease. ABC 7's Brad Palmer joins us live with more now. Brad, how's Walter doing?
Okay, I'm already seeing some questions. He is dead. Yes, he passed away, Karen. Yes, LB died too young. Yeah, it's very sad what happened to Walter Payton. What people have to understand is that he had a liver disease. It was rare at the time. From what I understand, by the time his doctor diagnosed him with the illness, they tried to get him on the donor list because he needed a new liver. But I think by that time, it had already progressed to a point where it was too far gone. He was very young when he passed away. But there was something else about Walter Payton as well. I want to fast forward to this piece here because he did hold a press conference to talk about it. I want to make sure I'm going to the right. Oh, where is it? I think I went past it. Yeah, right here. He did hold a press conference to discuss it. He didn't have to do that. But here we go.
That's his son, Jarrett, who had a news conference just last week to announce that he's going to the University of Miami to play football. And
yeah, so that's a little bit there. What I want to show you, though, is there's a reason why that award is given out to people in reference to Walter Payton. Let me make sure I got the right shoot balls. Why I pulled this up, I forgot to include this, the charity thing. There's something else I wanted to tell you about Walter Payton that I think is pretty significant. Walter Payton, after he left the NFL, it was later reported that Walter Payton started to struggle with depression. And the reason why I bring this up is because back during that time, we were not aware of CTE. We are aware of it now. So you have to keep in mind that some of the regulations that we have a part of the NFL today did not exist back then. And there was another player from the Chicago Bears. God, I forget his name. I think it was Jim something. There was another guy from the Chicago Bears also recently came out a couple years ago saying that he has been diagnosed with symptoms of CTE. He's still alive, but I wonder if that was already starting to affect Walter Payton, the fact that he could have been maybe already starting to have those symptoms of CTE. That Chicago Bears team, particularly back then, again, these rules and regulations did not exist back then. So what you have to understand is that it was more acceptable for football players to take these really hard hits. Like there was no such thing as helmet to helmet. Like that was not a penalty back then. And so I want to highlight Walter Payton's charity. And this is the reason why that award exists. It's not just because Walter Payton passed away and someone along the way decided, let's just go ahead and name this award after him. This is the piece you need to know. Payton and his wife, Connie, started a charity in 1988, aptly named the Walter Payton Foundation, that aided needy children in the streets of Chicago. After his playing days in the NFL were over, Payton devoted his life and finances to helping others, mainly children. He co-founded a theater program at an elementary school. Payton was famous for his legacy and charity work and is still viewed today. Walter Payton's charitable legacy endures today through the work of the Walter and Connie Payton Foundation. The foundation's website touts their mission statement to take an active role in helping those less fortunate to find stability while providing positive opportunities needed to live their lives with dignity and pride. So, for a football player to win the Walter Payton Award, that award isn't given to you just because of your performance on the football field. It's also given to you because of your performance in the community. How are you helping out people in your community? It's a hard award to get. So if you win that, that is actually a big deal. So tonight's feature, again, is Walter Payton. Hope you guys learned something new tonight. All right. I'm going to check the comments and we'll move on to the next story. Thank you for the super chat, Louise. So great you were able to come to DC. I was at JD's show Saturday, but I am a dork, so I didn't say hi. Okay. Thank you for the work you do. It's okay, Louise. That's funny. Yeah, we went to Jimmy Dore's show the night before. That was fun. I'm kind of shy too in those spaces too, Louise. I was kind of shy too. I was kind of nervous to go up to people and say, hi. Joan Jones, Walter Payton was a man among boys in every sense of the phrase. I hear you there. Sebastian, thank you, Sabby, for educating us about Black history, especially for me, a Gen Zer. Oh, thank you, Sebastian. And Lewis, Sabby, you pick much more interesting people than my elementary school did decades ago. Yeah, I try to pick people that are not already mentioned in like your history books, the people that aren't as obvious. I try to pick people who are different. Okay. Now, let's go ahead to the next story. Let me see what I'm pulling up here. We are moving on to this story about Don Lemon. This is going to be a rather quick one. If you have not heard, Don Lemon has come under fire again. I know some of you are like, how many times is this going to happen to Don Lemon? This time it is in reference to some remarks that he made about women being in their prime. So let's get a hold of this one. I have two clips I want to show you. Here's the first one from Sky News.
Well, it looks like Don Lemon's own co-workers have a problem with him. The CNN anchor has been in hot water this week after he spoke about Nikki Haley, the latest Republican to announce a run for the presidency. He made reference to her age, saying that she wasn't in her prime.
Politicians or something are not in their prime. Nikki Haley isn't in her prime. Sorry. When a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40s.
What do you call wait?
That's not according to me.
Prime for what?
It depends. I mean, it's just like prime. If you look it up, it'll. If you Google when is a woman in her prime, it'll say 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Let's go back to it. So that's the statement that put him in hot water. And obviously, you know, he was criticizing Nikki Haley there about her announcement to run for president. So Don Lemon is saying that she's not in her prime. But at the same time, you can't even run for president until you're 35 years old. So that's very strange. Now, I think there are other things to criticize Nikki Haley about other than her not being in her prime, so to speak. So let's play that one more time.
Politicians are something and not in their prime. Nikki Haley isn't in her prime. Sorry. When a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40s.
What are you
That's not
So he's saying a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s, maybe her 40s. That kind of sounds like he's talking about childbearing age. It just seems like that's what he's leaning towards. But I would ask, like, prime for what? In your prime to do what? In your prime to have kids? In your prime to run for office? So Nikki Haley's in her 50s. So technically, in reference to politics, she is in her prime. You know, it was the statement there, like women aren't in their, she's not in her prime. Women are supposed to be like, what? To run for office? Since when? And I want to tell you about the political divide here with this as well. Red team, blue team, right? So he's willing to make that statement about Nikki Haley, which I think the statement is ridiculous anyway. I guess Don Lemon doesn't think women should do stuff unless they're in their prime. Anyway, he's willing to make that statement about Nikki Haley, but Hillary Clinton was older than Nikki Haley when she ran for president. He didn't make that statement about Hillary Clinton, but again, she's running through the Democratic Party. So you see how this works? Red team, blue team. See how that works? Let's go on with the video.
Wait. That's not according to me.
Prime for what?
It depends. I mean, it's just like prime. If you look it up, it'll. If you Google when is a woman in her prime, it'll say 20s, 30s, and 40s.
And he says this with two women sitting right here at the table with him. Yikes.
The CNN anchor was accused of being sexist for making those remarks about a female in her 50s. Don Lemon later apologised, tweeting, "The reference I made to a woman's prime this morning was inartful and irrelevant, as colleagues and loved ones have pointed out, and I regret it. A woman's age doesn't define her either personally or professionally. I have countless women in my life who prove that every day." But according to Radar Online, Don Lemon's colleagues think the host has an ego. The source told the publication he has a colossal ego and he's the kind of person who goes around saying he's not going to take the fall for his show flopping. It's not his fault and the network's tanking and they shouldn't have pushed him out of his primetime slot. The ratings are way down. The new boss is implementing tough new rules.
So this was another thing that sure is funny. This is another thing that happened too. Remember, he was in a primetime slot and then he was removed from that slot and put into the morning show. And for those of you who, if you've never worked in like TV or broadcasting or anything like that, technically that's a demotion. And I know he said, no, I'm not being demoted, but in the TV world, in the broadcasting news world, that is considered a demotion. Everyone knows that evening primetime slot, speaking of prime, that evening primetime slot gets more views, the most ratings, right? So if you're removed from that and they put you on the morning show and you didn't ask for that, that means you technically you are demoted in a broadcast news sense because you are now going to the show that gets less views. That's just the reality of the situation. So there's that. So I'm pretty sure there's some angry, attitudes about that. But then also, yes, the ratings are down. We have been discussing this over on RBN as well. The ratings are down on CNN. The ratings are down on MSNBC. The ratings are down on, ever since Trump lost, the ratings have continued to decrease.
And no one is happy. All these people were pampered with perks and pats on the back until now, and all of a sudden Don, Wolf Blitzer and others are at a point of yikes, we're in trouble. Another source also told Fox News Digital that CNN colleagues had no idea what he was even talking about when he made those remarks about Nikki Haley. The CNN insider said, "Everyone's annoyed. People are definitely upset about it. I was trying to figure out what the hell he was even talking about. None of it made sense. It was a stupid thing to say." The New York Post had reported that Don Lemon's co-host Bobby Harlow actually stormed off set after the remarks were made, with a source telling the Post it was a well-timed bathroom break. These two are reported to have been smouldering for months, the source told the Post, which was seen in that exchange as she questioned Don Lemon on what his prime comments meant.
Imagine if this actually happened with a Fox News host. Imagine if it was a Fox News host that made that comment. CNN and MSNBC would eat this up, right?
After headlines continued days after, Don Lemon was absent from the show CNN this morning, but so far he hasn't been formally suspended or let go. His boss, CEO Chris Licht, reportedly told staffers that the comments he made on air were upsetting, unacceptable, and unfair to his co-hosts, and ultimately a huge distraction to the great work of this organisation. Further drama continued today after it was revealed even embattled Long Island Congressman George Santos cancelled an interview set to take place with Don Lemon. A
Listen, if George Santos canceled on you, come on now. The guy who lied about his whole identity and personality, if this guy canceled on you, what does that say? Right? Come on, guys.
Spokesperson for the New York Republican told the Daily Mail, "We heard the comments and it was in very poor taste, and we did not wish to do a sit down with someone who could speak ill of women in that regard. It shouldn't matter if it's a Republican or Democratic woman running for public office, but we're not going to sit down with someone who would say such horrible things. I don't think he should be rewarded for bad behavior."
Okay, so that's the clip I wanted to show you from Sky News. And then I also want to show you this clip from Fox News. I just want you to see how this one obviously is going to be more dramatic. As you could imagine. Here we go.
All right, so embattled CNN host Don Lemon is facing backlash from both sides after saying presidential candidate Nikki Haley is, quote, past her prime at 51 years old. Liberal women's advocacy group Ultraviolet ripping into the anchor saying, quote, from athletes to politicians and even his co-anchors, Lemon has used his power and platform to consistently undermine and demean powerful women. CNN should immediately suspend Lemon from any future political coverage indefinitely.
So notice how Fox News is framing this. They're saying that this has been an ongoing issue when it comes to Don Lemon about the way that he treats women. You see the difference between this is why I like to show you both, like, two different sides sometimes if I can. Like, notice how Sky News just kind of just reported the news. And notice how Fox News is now saying, whoa, this has been an ongoing issue. Let's go on.
Former South Carolina Congressman and host of Sunday Night in America, Trey Gowdy, joins us now. Trey, great to see you this morning. What do you make of this situation with Don Lemon?
Well, I actually think you're a little bit past your prime. Is there any way I could speak to Rachel this morning, or do I have to talk to you? I'll tell you what I think.
Something like that would happen. What is a prime? What is a prime? When is it? Okay.
Apparently, Ketanji Brown Jackson is older than Nikki Haley. He didn't say a word about her. Kamala Harris is older than Nikki Haley. It is one of the most profoundly stupid things that I have ever heard anyone say.
Yeah, I agree. It was stupid. It was ridiculous. And he brought up some pretty good examples there with Kamala Harris as well. But let's not be fooled by this, because the thing is, if it were the other way around, and if it was a Fox host who made that statement, it would be CNN doing this coverage right now. And Fox News would be back in their host. This is the whole thing about the red blue team game.
Gender bias, it's political bias. It's also stupid. The saving grace, Will, is that he said it on CNN's morning show, which means nobody heard it.
But it has been sort of the shot heard around the world since that time.
Oh, yeah, we definitely heard it. We definitely heard it. They may not have seen it on that show, but it definitely has made its way through the Twitterverse. That is for sure.
Trey, and you make a great point of the selective. I think that's also in reference. I think that should also be applied to the outrage about the comment as well. There was, this has never been brought up in other circumstances when, say, the political party was swapped. He didn't make this statement, as you pointed out. For any number of liberal women have held very high positions, not just Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yeah, here's the good news. Nikki Haley has seen it and heard it all before. I mean, she ran against three guys to be the governor of South Carolina. She is not going to be intimidated. I think it's just it is biased, but in every form it can manifest itself. It's also just, so patently stupid. You have to be 35 to run for the presidency.
See what I was saying, you guys? That's why that comment that he made, like, that didn't make any sense, especially when you look at politics, things from a political scale. You can't even run for president until you're 35. That's why that didn't make any sense to me. Do you guys think that this is actually a comment like this will actually make Nikki Haley look better? Let me know in the chat. Yes or no. Type yes if you think this will make Nikki Haley look better. Type no if you think it will not.
So if you're a woman and you age out of your prime at age 40, does that mean you just run for one term? I mean, Don Lemon is older than Nikki Haley. What does that say about him?
Wait a minute. Don Lemon is older than Nikki Haley? I missed that part before. I'm going to have to look that up. Colin said no. Jonathan said yes. Mastermind said no. I didn't realize Don Lemon is older than Nikki Haley. This is interesting. Oh, it's getting juicy here.
It's really, really great point. Let's touch on this, Trey. You got a new book out, Start, Stay, or Leave. It's out now. It's a really fascinating book about your life, but it is not just about your life. It's really about the way you went about making decisions in your life.
We don't need to hear any more from Trey. But yeah, I wanted you to see the way it's discussed on both of those channels, because I thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, I do have to say that there's hypocrisy there. There really is. Because the thing is, that statement wasn't made about Kamala Harris. That statement wasn't made about Hillary Clinton, because those are people that are part of the Democratic Party. There are several things to criticize Nikki Haley about. You can criticize her for being a warmonger. You can criticize her for being a neocon. You can criticize her for lying about racism, including the fact that when she ran for governor of South Carolina, and I lived in South Carolina at that time, so I do remember this very well, she was called a raghead by one of her own party members. I showed that on the show. The gentleman that said, we already have a raghead in the White House, we don't need one in the State House. That was her party. That was her party. There's so many other things you can call out Nikki Haley for. But to stoop that low and to say someone's not in their prime, that was weak. That was weak. Notori said, and if I was her, I would milk this, and I know she's going to milk it. LOL. Yeah, she probably should. Matt said that ish. Don said, I'd be careful with profanity on here, you guys. Don said was not really cool. Someone said his head's so big, he has to go outside to think. Yeah. I'll take that comment on Don Lemon has always been a pompous twin. Oh man, the past 2 years have not been great for CNN. I'll take that comment on I think that's, yeah, I can see that way. Shout out to Anthony, who's been a Sabby member for 6 months. Thanks for covering the rally. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Anthony. And speaking of the rally, we're going to go there. This is the call-in discussion for tonight, the rally. We're going to talk about that. I did tell you I would do a recap, so I have a couple of clips that I do want to show you. I think I'm going to start with those clips first. So obviously, people have criticized the rally from the get-go before it even happened. People are still criticizing the rally now, and that includes Miss Rachel Maddow. Now, I talked about this earlier this morning on Rising. Jimmy Dore actually called her out here and said, Maddow is a straight up psychopathic warmonger that's actually not hyperbole. She's pretending that NATO and the US did not intentionally provoke this war, and she focuses on some rando holding Russia flag to discredit the peace rally. Of course she did. Let me show you this clip here. So many incorrect things in this.
I mean, truly random rally on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A rally in support of Russia, I guess, with all.
She doesn't even know. She's guessing. No, the rally was not in support of Russia. It was a call for peace rally. It was an anti-war rally. Look at the description. We talked about this on RBN earlier. Pro-Russia demonstrators rally in Washington, D.C. Now, I was there. I covered the event, live streamed the event. I didn't see anyone from MSNBC interviewing any of these activists. You know who I did see interviewing these activists, these protesters, and some of the speakers? The independent media journalists and commentators. They were the ones actually interviewing people. MSNBC just showed up there to get some footage that they thought was something, which was really nothing, to make it seem like this event was something that it wasn't. Let's go on.
Given all the Russian flags, at least a rally against the U.S. supporting Ukraine in trying to stand up against the Russian invasion of their country. This was a tiny event. It was small. It was a weird assemblage of Americans. There were Proud Boys there.
Notice how she said it's a tiny event. It was very small. It was a weird assemblage of Americans. I'm going to show you a clip that shows you actually what the crowd looked like. Because, see, they purposely showed shots when it wasn't filled in, obviously. If it was so tiny, why did she cover it? If it was that tiny. It was estimated there were at least 1,000 people there. Let's go on.
There were some of the white supremacist groups you'd recognize from the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville a few years ago.
How did she know that? Where are those people in this video? Did they interview any of these people? How does she know that those people were? How does she know that? You see how she can just jump on mainstream media and say anything without any proof or evidence? She don't have to back anything up. She argued, remember, she was able to argue that her show is not news, it's entertainment.
Also represented prominently the remains of the bizarre Lyndon LaRouche cult. There were a lot of people with Russian flags, also the occasional flag of the former Soviet Union. Also, at least one person who guest hosts for Tucker Carlson on the Fox News channel was there as a featured speaker.
Notice how, out of all the people who spoke at the rally, notice how she focused on Tulsi Gabbard. Do you see what they do? I don't understand why people take mainstream media seriously at all. I really don't. You cannot take them seriously. There were over 20 speakers at this rally, and they zero in on Tulsi Gabbard. That's on purpose.
There were anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists, a lot of them. There were cryptocurrency promoters. It was a really weird group. It was a small rally and a weird one.
A lot of them, a small rally and a weird one. And for people who don't understand, even when I went to the Assange rally in DC, I think they estimated there was like 200 to 300 people, which is big for the ones in DC. The way it was explained to me, they usually don't even get like 100 people to show up. So that Assange rally that I went to in October, like they said, that was pretty good. You know, size-wise, that was great. And I want people to understand this one right here, this has been the largest one. This has been the largest one. This probably will be the largest one this year, unless we continue to grow. We need to have more rallies to call for peace. But I know some people are like, oh, 1,000 people, that's small. That's the largest one that I've been to since the George Floyd protest. So people have to understand that. Let's go on.
But that's what it looks like. That's the assemblage of short straws and split ends and loose change and loose electrons that's advocating in this country that Russia's in the right in this war and America.
Notice how they keep showing the same people. All the people that were at this rally, they keep showing the same guy. This is what they do.
America should be on Putin's side as he keeps invading other countries.
Not one person who gave a speech at this rally said that. Not one. Don't believe me? Go watch the stream. I recorded all the speeches. Not one person said that.
I mean, no disrespect to the Americans who turned out as part of this small event this weekend, but it's not like they represent a big constituency that is arguing for this pro-Russia point of view.
You see that? She already letting you know you're small. And Rachel Maddow damn well knows That event was published everywhere. She damn well knows what the event was. She's trying to portray it like it was something else. Now, General Johnny chimed in here. I appreciate this, General Johnny. He said, if this rally was so tiny and insignificant, why is she covering it? This is the same thing that I said. If it's that small, why are you bringing attention to it? What? She sure as hell didn't bring attention to the Julian Assange rally, including the fact that that same day there were over 5,000 people locking arms around the parliament in the UK. She didn't call attention to that. Now, I told you guys before, we'll do recap. I'm going to show you a couple of speeches from people who had better internet quality than me. Ford Fisher did an awesome job. Now, Ford Fisher, I believe what he did, because he was next to me at one point, I believe Ford Fisher, he live streamed part of it, some of it, but then he also had another device where he recorded speeches and interviews as well. So his video quality is going to be phenomenal. The internet connection wasn't so great. I think this was the spottiest, fuzziest internet connection I've had to deal with on the ground with StreamYard. Plus StreamYard mobile is not great. They don't have an app, so you have to log in through Chrome. I'm looking at other options as well. But I want to show you some of the speeches. So shout out to Ford Fisher for this, because he was there doing the damn thing. So first up, we want to give a shout out to Tara Reid. I want you to hear some of the things that were said, because obviously mainstream media and some people in independent media are trying to frame things in a way that are false. So here's Tara Reid.
Hello, everyone. You know my story. Joe Biden didn't ask for my consent. And his administration is not asking for the American citizens' consent to enter into this proxy war against Russia via Ukraine. Over $100 billion in weapons and aid, and it's going where? We don't know. It's a money laundering scheme. There needs to be a congressional investigation into Joe Biden for what he's doing for all of us. I will be there for you. I will tell my story at that congressional investigation, and I will go under oath. Now, we're here today not because we have anything bad to say about the Ukrainian people. They are suffering. The Ukrainian workers are suffering. The Russians are suffering. This is about the Western Empire that has basically used the military-industrial complex and weaponized it to these endless wars. Julian Assange has given up his freedom to give us that information. When he told us about the 2014, when he published the information about the 2014 coup that was Western-backed, that led to this moment in history that we are now. The Biden administration is taking us to World War III, and we're not going to have it. You know, there's a Shakespeare saying, as flies to wanton boys are we to the gods, they kill us for their sport. The elites are not going to kill us. There are more of us than them. We are going to stop this war and stop the endless funding to Ukraine. I see the Russian flags out there. Hello, Russia. You are not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy. China is not our enemy. The military-industrial complex has hijacked the Democratic and Republican Party. And it didn't take much money to do it, did it? So we have to take it back. And we have to demand from these politicians. Because remember, they work for us. We don't work for them.
That's right.
I want to leave on this note. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange.
awesome. So that was Tara Reid doing the damn thing there. Tara, like, you know, she set the house on fire, I think. And I think she made some really awesome statements. She doesn't mess around. Now, notice, did you hear Tara Reid say anything in that statement about what did she say? One of the very first things that she said in her statement was, we acknowledge the pain and suffering that the Ukrainian people are going through. But see, Rachel Maddow isn't going to tell you that. She's not going to show you that. Of all the people to show at the rally of Tulsi Gabbard, Dennis Kucinich was there. He was a Democrat politician. Notice Rachel Maddow didn't show you that. They didn't show you Tara Reid. They didn't show you Chris Hedges. They didn't show you Jill Stein. There were over 20 speakers. They didn't show any of these people. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Now, next up is Max Blumenthal's speech, and I thought this one was really great as well. So take a listen to this.
This city filled up with homeless Vietnam veterans, often still wearing their camouflage BDU, at the dawn of a homeless crisis that is now completely consuming our cities and which is apparent all around us. It was only recently, just a few years ago actually, as I walked through a riverside park by my home here in DC in Anacostia, that I noticed a small memorial to the Bonus Army, commemorating another generation of US veterans who had been abandoned and betrayed by their government. Nearly 90 years ago, thousands of veterans of World War I gathered on Anacostia Flats and along the Potomac, in Hoovervilles, makeshift camps, at the dawn of the Great Depression, to demand the bonuses they had been promised and denied by the US government. They had fought in a segregated army, but they now stood together and lived together as black men and white men. Some were supporters of communism, some were supporters of the kind of America First style conservatism that was becoming in fashion at the time. And all were demonized by a government that saw this show of cultural and political unity as a threat to an empire in the making. Army Chief of Staff Douglas MacArthur warned that pacifism and its bedfellow communism are all around us, as he and the future heroes of the US effort in World War II, Dwight Eisenhower and George Patton, sent their forces against these betrayed veterans. And on July 28, 1932, MacArthur and the US Army attacked the Bonus Army and massacred them with tanks, cavalry, and machine guns, following orders to kill the men they had fought beside below the US flag in the trenches of Europe. Now we stand here 90 years later in the same city where the
I didn't think about that, mister. Yeah, that's a good point.
This massacre occurred, but countless disastrous wars later. And on the precipice of another economic crisis, we know that by coming here today, by coming together across artificial political boundaries and cultural lines imposed on us by our elites, we stand in the muddy boots of the Bonus Army as an imperial regime in deep decline trembles before us. And that's why it's so tragic to me that this rally has come under attack, not only by the usual suspects in the corporate media, but by sectarian forces that parade as progressive and anti-war. They say that right and left should not come together, that our petty differences must define and divide us, and that this rally is a danger to the movement. Well, let me speak now as a journalist who's met and lived with people on the other side of the guns of US empire. Let me speak about the Palestinians I met in the rubble of Gaza who'd seen their families wiped out by US-made missiles and howitzers fired by Israel's apartheid army simply because they dared to resist their dispossession. Let me speak to you about the Syrian people I met in Damascus who'd seen their city surrounded by NATO-backed jihadist militias and who now withstand Israeli bombs and sadistic US sanctions. Let me talk to you about the people I met in Venezuela, Nicaragua, in Cuba, the troika of resistance, who have bravely weathered the storm of CIA destabilization plots and economic blockades. The people I know in the Horn of Africa, from Eritrea to Addis Ababa, who have seen 5 million people displaced by a US-backed proxy war that few Americans even know took place. The Koreans I met, who've been separated from their own people and families by an imposed divide, who have not known peace since the genocidal US war waged on them. And the people I know in the republics of Donbass and Lugansk, who have suffered for 9 years under the US-supplied bombs of the Ukrainian military and its sig-heiling neo-Nazi brigades, who celebrate and worship the Nazi collaborator Stepan Bandera, who murdered my own people in one pogrom after another. These people that I know and that I met on the other side of US empire, they don't care if you're right-wing or left-wing. They don't care if you're a camo-clad Trumper or a progressive social justice activist. They don't care if you're vaccinated and masked and boosted. They don't care if you are libertarian or communist. All they want you to do is be out here today to rage against this sick, satanic, neoconservative war machine. That's what they want. Our corporate media, which is just a megaphone for our oligarchic elite, is constantly telling us who our enemies are. They said our enemy was in Serbia when I was a teenager. Then they said our enemy was in Afghanistan. Then they said our enemy was in Iraq. And maybe our enemy was down the street in the local mosque. And we are here today to say that we know who our real enemy is. Our enemy is not in Russia. Our enemy is you, the corporate media, and the oligarchy that you speak for. Our enemy is the empire that's robbed us of our rights, that's looted our treasury for its insane imperial regime change wars, and that has hounded and jailed real journalists like Julian Assange. They say we need to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them here. We say that we will fight the neoconservatives over here before they kill millions more over there. Can you dig it?
He said, can you dig it? I forgot about that part.
That's not our war. Whether in Ukraine or the war they're planning over the Straits of Taiwan, their war is not our war. Our war is for the hundreds of thousands of homeless people sleeping in the cold. Our war is to clean up our rivers. Our war is to fix our crumbling schools and roads. Our war is to fight for the minds of our brothers and sisters subjected to a nonstop tidal wave of corporate media propaganda. Our war starts here. Our war starts today. Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. So that one was from Max Blumenthal. I thought that was a really good speech. I'm not going to show everyone's speech, obviously. We don't have time for that. I'm sorry, just keep it as it is. But also, Jimmy Dore had a pretty good speech. I want to go ahead and show that one as well. People are already trying to criticize this. Greg Bruce says Warriors. Yeah, that's where that comes from. Can you dig it? I think that comes from Warriors. Is that from Warriors or no? That is from Warriors. That's right. For the younger people in the chat, Warriors is a movie. It's about street gang. It's a really cool movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a cult classic. You need to watch it. And that's one of the things that they say in the movie. But they also say this line that you may not be familiar with. They say, "Warriors, come out and play." Oh man, they had a rough night in that movie. Anywho, here's the speech from Jimmy. I want to show this, and then I'm going to give what I think were pros and cons about the rally. And then I have a quick announcement, a warning that you need to be aware of. And then I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll do call-in. So let's get into this.
Jimmy! Hello, thank you. I'm going to head for Nelly one more time. It's great to be here. It's really encouraging to see so many people come out like this. It really warms my heart. And it reminds me of my best friend, Barry Crimmins. He was a hilarious and courageous comedian, a staunch critic of the U.S. government, and I know if he was alive, he'd be here today.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
But
I'm sorry. His mic went out for a little bit, and then okay, here we go. He had to start over.
Hilarious and courageous comedian. He was a staunch critic of the U.S. government, who I know if he was alive would want to be here today. And people would always ask him, hey, if you don't like America, why don't you move to another country? And he would say, because then I'd become a victim of our foreign policy. It's not what people can't hear in bed. Why is this? It's too low.
Oh yeah, I forgot. It happened twice. Sorry. Okay.
Hilarious, and he was a courageous comedian. He was a staunch critic of the U.S. government. If he was alive, I'm sure he'd be here today. People would always ask him, hey, if you don't like America so much, if you're such a critic, why don't you move to another country? And he said, I would, but then I'd become a victim of our foreign policy. Joke worked twice. He used to say there's a reason why there's no viable third party in America. It's because corporations don't want to cut a third check. And that's a shame, because the two parties in America that we have just ain't cutting it. They both support sending over $100 billion to Ukraine. We could have spent that money saving lives with universal health care, but instead we spend that money taking lives overseas, which is our specialty. We send them what we call foreign aid. Foreign aid, that's money to another country. We drop care packages on their heads from the sky, but it's not full of food. And the only money we have left over, we're going to spend shooting down hobby balloons. Can you imagine if the Independence Day was just about balloons? I mean, the movie, right? The aliens are invading, and man, they are taking their time. At least Macy's figured out how to make a balloon look like somebody. They could attack us with Superman or something. Would Mickey Mouse's adorable ears eavesdropping on our cell phone conversations be so much worse than the NSA? I don't think so. Do you know we could end this war today through diplomacy, but our politicians want to enrich weapons manufacturers so they keep donating to them to the tune of $100 billion. Chris Hedges has called America a mafia state. Systems of governance that are seized by a tiny cabal become mafia states. The military-industrial complex and the Ukraine war represent an orgy of looting and corruption. America is the most powerful mafia that has ever existed. And the hitmen in that mafia have military pilot licenses. The difference between our government these days and the mafia in the 1940s, well, the mafia in the 1940s helped defeat the Nazis. They used longshoremen and union leaders. It's a sad day when you can't even trust the mafia anymore. Do you know what America really needs? We need to take the money out of Ukraine and give it to everybody here so we can buy a balloon and a gun. That's the only way we can settle this. We all need to be floating around shooting each other down out of the sky. Better yet, the guns shoot vaccine syringes. Yeah, that's America. Eat boosters, you motherfuckers. America is so corrupt, even our Peace Prize winners are war criminals. Barack Obama won a Peace Prize, and he immediately ramped up the war in Afghanistan, started bombing Libya, put a hit on Osama bin Laden, dropped 26,000 bombs in Syria. And that's the thing about those Peace Prizes. Nobody ever tries to win a second one. I have a list of things we could have bought with that $100 billion instead of sending it to Ukraine for killing people. Instead of sending money to Ukraine, we could get President Biden a dog that knows where to lead him when a press conference is over.
I'm sorry, that was...
We sent enough money to Ukraine to buy everybody a tank of gas.
Damn.
For all the money we've given to Ukraine, do you know how many eggs we could buy? Almost a dozen. With $100 billion, you know, they could say you could end homelessness for $20 to $40 billion. We could have ended homelessness, then restart homelessness, then say we were only kidding, and then end it again. We can't end homelessness in America. We can't even fix the bridges that the homeless people live under. That's how corrupt we are. Every American for $100 billion could have had a home. But it's way more important that we make sure nobody in Ukraine has a home, because now it's going to be turned into a crater. We could give every homeless person in America $160,000. Or, if you want to help Americans but still show our support for Ukraine, we could buy every homeless person in the United States 7,000 Ukraine flag fleece blankets. We could have used that $100 trillion. $100 billion would have provided universal health care to all the people in Algeria, Botswana, Morocco, Rwanda, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Romania, Croatia, Mexico, and Peru. Oh, wait. Those countries already have universal health care. My bad. For the $100 billion, we could buy 2 FTX collapses. For $100 billion, we could buy every person on Earth a blue check mark on Twitter. Because shouldn't we all have an equal opportunity to be insufferable assholes? For $100 billion, we could get Chick-fil-A to stay open on Sundays and perform gay weddings. For $100 billion, we could buy an entire separate Russian invasion of Ukraine and have enough left over to pay Hunter Biden's monthly salary for the rest of his life. For $100 billion, we could break the Bank of England 3 times.
Hi, Juliet.
We could buy every man, woman, and child in America an opportunity to pick something really nice from the Goop catalog. I know I didn't get that joke either.
I didn't know what that was. What is... Do you guys, someone tell me in the comments, what is the Goop? What's a Goop catalog? What is that? Let me know.
For $100 billion, we could have the entire cast of Shark Tank dropped into an actual Shark Tank.
Yeah.
We could pay for 90 Alex Jones lawsuits. We could buy a shit ton of balloons to spy on China and still have enough money left over for complete regulatory capture. Isn't that special? We could have gotten like 5 experimental drugs approved. For $100 billion, we can remake the Marvel Avengers movie with the entire original cast, but as a porno. We could do that 90 times over. We could have spent that money on transportation, high-speed rail, but it was more important to fund the people who duct tape somebody to a lamppost with their pants pulled down. We could cure cancer, but Big Pharma wouldn't be happy with that because they prefer sick people instead of healthy ones. With the money we sent to Ukraine, we can hire an entirely separate new police force to protect us from the current police force. We could have funded everyone having free college instead of buying a Mount Kilimanjaro's worth of blow for Zelensky. Why are we sending that money to Nazis in Ukraine when we could be funding Nazis here in America struggling to buy eggs?
Now, some people already took that comment and they've tried to spin it and make it seem like it's something that it's not. Some people are taking that comment and saying, see, we told you guys, like Jimmy Dore supports Nazis or whatever. The context is very important. Of course, they didn't show the context.
Isn't that just like our government to neglect all the Nazis we have here in America? This is really a fight over nuclear war. Just across the road, there's a statue of Albert Einstein, and man, he looks depressed. He once said, if I could do it all over again, I'd be a plumber. You know why he said that? I thought it was because his toilet was always backed up. It was because the military-industrial complex used his science to kill people. They took Einstein's discovery and used it to melt the skin of Japanese civilians. Entire cities full of children and animals extinguished in less than a minute. Generations poisoned by radiation. Bombs today are much more powerful than those bombs we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I know there's some people who wouldn't show up to this peace rally this anti-war rally because of some of the speakers they didn't like on this stage. And I get what they're saying. They're saying, hey, I want to help stop a nuclear war, but not with those people. I get it. I'm the same way. My house caught on fire a couple of months ago, and when the firemen showed up, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What's your views on Social Security and Medicare? I mean, I get this is a scary situation. My house is on fire. But first, I need to get your stance on LGBTQ and gender-affirming surgery.
JB, if you're still in the chat, that's the house is on fire thing.
I know my house is burning down, but are you vaxxed? I need to see proof of at least one booster. I need to know what your position is on gender-affirming surgery. What age should it start and what's your cutoff? And they're standing there looking at me like I'm fucking crazy. I guess you don't get to put out my fire then, and my house is gonna burn down. I hope you're happy. So when people give me a litmus test and they ask me what kind of lefty am I always say I'm a Sandy Koufax lefty. Okay. When it comes down to survival, which this is, there is no gift basket with a card thanking you for your participation. You don't get everything you attended to like in a hotel, but maybe you do get to survive. And that's the whole point. Save the nitpicking for Whole Foods. The people who won't be attending today had never any intentions of doing so. And if it wasn't one of the speakers, it would have been the weather. It would have been because they have more important things to do than survive. They'll be home watching CNN not cover this all day. The people who don't want to attend this rally because they don't like a speaker reminds me of what W.C. Fields said, that he won't drink water because fish fuck in it. You have to work with people you disagree with big time, even sometimes people you hate, because we need each other to survive. I'm reminded of the words of Frederick Douglass, who said, I will join with anyone to do good, but with no one to do bad. If Black Panthers can march hand in hand with the KKK down Las Vegas Boulevard to get welfare payments reinstated, we can join hands with the right wing, the libertarians, the left, the socialists, the communists, everybody to stop a nuclear war. And what's happening right here at this rally is what actually scares the hell out of the establishment. Everybody from the left, everybody from the right, everybody from the middle coming together to realize that we have more in common than divides us, and we share a common enemy. That enemy is the military-industrial complex and the oligarchy. The same oligarchy that did a controlled demolition of our economy, and then they want me to hate my neighbor for the pain I'm feeling because of that, because they wouldn't take a vaccine that didn't work the way they said it did in the first fucking place. Well, I'm not gonna hate my neighbor. I'm gonna love my neighbor. Because my neighbor is suffering under the same oligarchy that I'm suffering under, and he didn't cause it. The oligarchy did, and they don't want us to join together. And I have one message for the right and the left. If everybody on the right could just realize that not everybody on the left likes Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. We just want to end the wars and have health care that doesn't bankrupt us. That would go a long way. And if everybody on the left could just realize that not everybody on the right is a white supremacist Trumper gun nut, they're just fucking gun nuts. I love you, love each other. Come together. I'll see you at the next anti-war rally. Stay together.
Now, what MSNBC didn't show you is, yes, they showed you part of this crowd here. They didn't even show you when it's filled in. But also, if you notice, which you kind of can't see it completely on here either, is that behind Jimmy there's a whole other crowd that you can't really see. It's one of those things like if someone had like an aerial view, you could see it. So it's actually more people than they said it was. Now let's get into pros and cons. Pros, compared to some of the other rallies that I've been to, this one was actually pretty organized. Like, to be honest with you, like the people were doing the damn thing. Hello, Mary, what's up? It was pretty organized. I'll give them that. They had sound equipment. Like, these things are not cheap, you guys. Like, if you have planned an outdoor event before, sound equipment, that kind of stuff is expensive. From the moment I got there, I went to the press table and I said, I'm here, I'm so-and-so. They gave me my press pass. And so the area that I was in is that area that was fenced in. And then you see the rally, the protesters on the outside of those barricades, right? So I had no issues like getting in or getting that stuff done and set up. I will say, like, they were pretty much for the most part on schedule, which is not easy for people to do sometimes too. I've had to deal with that before, where things don't run on schedule. They said they were starting at 12:30. They started at 12:30. And then after the event, we left the Lincoln Memorial and we marched to the White House. And you can see that on my live stream. I'm not sure if everybody who streamed got that piece, but you'll see me like walking and talking to people. That's where like I got a quick interview with Garland Nixon, Colin. I ran into Black in the Empire when I was walking, and also Pasta from Convo Couch and Courtney Banks. She was also there. So it was great to meet and see a lot of people. Some of you guys who are in the chat now were there. I'm sorry if I couldn't stop and talk to everybody. It's kind of hard, like if I'm the one holding like the phone, streaming and trying to talk to people at the same time too. But it was actually really organized. So I'll give them that. Plus, cons. I mean, this is not a secret. I've said this before. I told you guys if I organized this event, some of the people I still would have invited, but some of the people I would have not invited. I would have invited people like Margaret Kimberly, Jamu Baraka. I would have invited someone like Gerald Horn, Cornel West, although Cornel West might have been difficult to get because he's very, 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 very busy. I would have added them as well. When we talk about one of the criticisms was the fact that there weren't more like Black voices. There are a list of people that I would have invited, and I would have probably invited those people first. But again, I didn't organize the event. Now, that being said, it was brought to my attention, and I think everyone needs to understand this, that apparently some of the people who were speakers actually reached out to the organizers and asked them if they could speak. And I think a lot of people don't know that. And like, I honestly did not know that until I got there. That's when I realized. I was like, oh, okay, that's different. So I think that's something that needs to be made clear for people to really understand. But one of the things I will say, it's been brought to my attention, and I was going to ask Caleb about this, but someone did just put this in the chat. President Jesus, Caleb's group apologized on Twitter for the flags. Yeah, so that is one of the criticisms that like that did not come from, obviously, from the organizers. Apparently, the people that you saw that had those Russian flags, those were people that were part of Caleb Maupin's group. So apparently they have issued an apology for that. I think it doesn't help the narrative, right? Like, it was easy for MSNBC to, oh, let me do this. It's a pro Russia rally because there's the flags. It was easy for them to do that, use that criticism. But there were also people there. I saw Ukraine flags too, but of course that was not captured. That wasn't captured. There was a video that was presented by Roger Waters. He sent a video because he couldn't be there in person. I think he's on tour in Europe right now. And Cynthia McKinney, I believe, sent a video earlier on. So someone keeps asking me, was Cynthia McKinney there? No, she was not there. Cynthia McKinney's in Bangladesh. So some of the people sent videos, and then there were some people, but most people were there in person. I also want to tell you guys, if you haven't heard it, please go listen to Pasta's speech, because he really points out the fact that both of these parties are just warmonger, money maker parties. So please check that out. Also, other things I will say, again, I think that for the most part, I felt like it was pretty organized, and I've been a part of a lot of rallies and it's not always that way. And so I'll give, credit for that. Again, as an organizer, I would have done things. There are things I would have done a little bit differently, but I was not an organizer for that event. I didn't see any animosity between people in the crowd. The people who were there agreed that we need to call for peace, that we need to stop these wars. And so when it came to that particular issue, people were able to come together and unite over that. The other issues, organize with other people with those things. I already know there's people I can organize with for Medicare for all. There's people I can organize with for student debt cancellation, right? I know people, comrades who are really passionate about that have tried to organize for that before. I have my go-tos when it comes to organizing, who I will organize with over certain issues. There are certain people I'm going to organize with for policing. I have those go-tos. I think if you want people to organize with you and agree with every single political policy that you agree with, well, you just might as well just vote for people who are running on those types of campaigns, because that's essentially what you're asking for, in a sense. Like, it's like you're kind of asking for a politician to support all those policies. And I think a lot of us coming from that Bernie movement, that's where we get that from. Because Bernie Sanders, because of the policies, brought people together that otherwise really would not have been together. And I think we need to talk about the fact that at that time, there was like bragging rights. And Nick talked about this. There were bragging rights during Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign to say, hey, I was convincing Trump supporters. I was convincing conservatives about Medicare for all. Those were bragging rights back then. But notice how that's not a bragging right now. Now, if you do that, you're smeared. So we need to ask ourselves, what is it really all about? And I will say to people, if you don't support something, then don't support it. But I'm not going to spend all my time and energy on Twitter. I'm not going to argue with these people on Twitter. I don't look at my mentions. So you're wasting your time. I'm just going to be real here. And then also, that time that you were spending crapping on events, and I've seen the same people do it over and over. Now, with this event, there were some different people, but for the most part, there's a particular group of people that constantly come out and smear any type of action. And I've seen them do it multiple times. I saw them do it with the Medicare for All rally too. You need to ask yourself, why don't they take that time back and organize their own thing and do it the way that they want to do it? Because they don't intend to. That is never part of the plan. Some of these people, I've said before, are infiltrators. I've worked in organizing spaces with some of these people, and I could tell that they were really trying to stop the event from happening. They are not to be trusted. So I know who I can organize with and who I can't organize with. But if you're spending most of your time on Twitter trying to stop people from doing something and you're not doing anything, you're looking a little sus. You look a little suspect. Some of these people have families. It's really weird to me. Like, you're not spending any time with your family. How are you on Twitter 24/7? Don't you have kids? Don't you have a husband or something? What is wrong with people? It's not a healthy place to be. Now, speaking of not a healthy place to be, I need to warn you about this very quickly. There is an account on Telegram that is pretending to be me. That is not me. The account here, notice how it shows my show name. It says Sabby Sabs. That's not me. So I want to be very clear. Do not contact this account. If this account, that account contacts you, do not respond. What they're trying to do, and I'll show you, because I tested it. Thankfully, a subscriber warned me about this. And they said, I don't think that this is you. And they were correct. This is definitely not me. So I sent a message that said test. And it worked just like a charm. Hey, Sabrina, thanks for the acknowledgement. Quickly share a screenshot photo of the message you received on YouTube via your YouTube comment section for verification. Cheers. First and foremost, guys, big warning. I would never send you something like this. I don't do giveaways on this show. I never have. I never will. You would never receive a message from me on social media asking you to do something like this. You would never see me contact you on social media and ask you for money. Apparently, this account has asked people for money. This is a scam. It's not just me. Apparently, this has happened to other people too. So I want to show you going on. I said, this account has been reported for impersonation. So they sent laugh emojis, said active, so F off. I said, again, this account has been reported for impersonation. And then they actually fell for it like a dummy. I got some $600 from your subscribers. More are coming. They all look ugly. Lawsuit coming. Thank you for the IP address and confirmation. So they just admitted that they were pretending to be me and that they were getting money from people. Do not give anybody money via social media at all. Don't do this. If I ever request something from you, it will be on this show. So if you didn't hear me say it on the show, first of all, I don't ask you guys for money. I tell you about my Patreon, but you never see me come on this show. I haven't even done a fundraiser on the show. So that in itself should warn you. Someone told me this account has also been making comments on YouTube videos as well, trying to get people to give the money. Do not give the money. That is not me. So the big red flag is that I don't ask you for money. This is fraud. And what's worst about it is that they got money from people using my name. They didn't respond after that last comment, by the way. So be careful, guys. Again, I'm not trying to scare you, but just be careful. Remember, I would never ask you for money. But I do want to shout out patrons really quick, and then I'll pass it to you, Eric, to do the comments really quick, because I know we got to do a call in. I just want to make sure I don't forget about them. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Again, if you're interested in being a patron, there are 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. And I want to give a shout out to a new Sabby patron. Let's give it up for Become Useful, who is a newbie. That's what we call them over here. Thank you guys so much for your support. Again, guys, always remember, I would never ask you for money. Keep in mind. All right, Eric, I'm ready whenever you are. There's a couple of comments, I think, left here, and there might be some more as well.
All right, I can pick those up. All right, here we are on a Tuesday night. This is where we give Sabby a little break before we jump into the call-in show. Yeah, let me put that good old call-in link in the chat. Tonight's call-in is on the Rage Against the War Machine rally recap. And there we go. There's that link for that. So you can do call-in on your browser, or you can do install the call-in app on your smartphone, and you can listen in, you can participate. We want to be hearing from you all. And we got a good number of chats queued up, so I'm gonna talk about hit those while Sabrina has her break, and then she'll be back to close out the show, and then we'll jump into call-in. Let's see. Thanks for this super chat, Ripsai. But somehow Hillary was ripe for the picking. Yeah, about the Nikki Haley comments from Don Lemon. Yeah, in her prime. Thanks for that. Thanks for this one. Cool Blue, for your consideration, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris was born in 1964. Ex-South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley was born in 1972. Thanks for that. And this one too, Don Lemon, born in March 1, 66. Nikki Haley was born January 20th, 72. Yeah, kind of hitting that question of who's in their prime and who isn't. And, it's always, these things always have, so much this gender aspect to it too, where of course you never hear about this with men, or men get to look distinguished, and, women get to be talked about as being past their prime. But we all know what Don Lemon is. Thanks for this one, Jonathan. I think this is actually good news. It means they know this type of rallies can grow. Yeah, talking about how Rachel Maddow was talking about this, and it's that old thing of all press is good press, and it's attention. I also had to laugh that during Maddow's comments in that NBC segment, she showed the sign saying Biden is the Nord Stream bomber, and they gave that sign like good screen time, which is kind of hilarious. Thanks for this, Roger Meadows. I didn't know that President Hoover had them murdered. Yeah, referring to when Max Blumenthal was talking about the bonus army, and that they sent in the troops and busted them up with force. Let's see. Thanks for this one from Ryan76. Where did you get that Max Blumenthal clip? And they actually posted that one recently. I happened to find it. In that this is the link to it, which goes to which is the Gray Zone. If you look for the Gray Zone on YouTube, you'll find the clip on their channel, and lots of other good stuff on there. It's kind of a mastermind hour. Jimmy, I'm your neighbor. Do you love me enough to loan me $500? Yeah, give him a call. Mastermind hour. Thanks for this super chat, Sean. Great show, Sabby. Peace to all. Thanks for that. And then I noticed Betsy had this one in there. Sabby, how come you didn't get to speak in front of the White House? Please share your speech with us. And I wasn't sure. It seemed to get a little chaotic towards the end there of the speech. But I would say, Betsy, let's talk about it on Call-In, which is coming up soon, and we can see if Sabrina has any more detail on that one. And then this one from Desert Mantis. I only send donations to that prince in Nigeria. Yeah, I think that's a smart policy. We also had from on the Rockfins from Mr. Roger Meadows. Sabrina, you should have told me that. You should have told Eric London that is utterly false and complete fiction. That's referring to an earlier inside joke. Biden not visiting Ohio because of giving up on Ohio voters is nothing but partisan BS again. Time we abolish all political parties at every level of government. And he said, I remember that Bears rap video. Jim McMahon from the Bears is who you might mean. I mean, the other thing I remember with Bears in 1985 is our Patriots, and this was back when in 1985 the Patriots football team. This is before Brady, and they always had these terrible teams. And then in '85 they finally had a decent team and went to the Super Bowl, and then the Bears wiped out the Patriots in the Super Bowl. But that's pre-Brady, so that was another era. Let me get in and scroll this down. All right, and thanks for this super chat. Let me get back. Thanks for this chat on Rockfin. Scott Johnson. The irony of Don Lemon saying Nikki Haley is not in her prime and he's no longer in prime time. Yeah, that is ironic and funny in Lemon. Yeah, we'll see if we even see him again. I mean, geez. And thanks for this tip on Rockfin. JVB says, beautiful show, Sabby, and thank you. And thanks for that paid tipped comment on the Rockfins. All right, let me shift this over here. Yeah, so here we're going to have Colin, the Sabby Sabs Collins show will be coming up very soon. Why didn't that show up? Here we go. Angela, yeah, the Bears Shuffling Crew from way back when. And now it's like a different era where the Patriots have been big champions, and then the Bears don't seem to be I don't know. Do the Bears suck all the time now, Sabby? It seems like it.
They're still pretty bad. The Bears. Remember the SNL skit?
The Bears. Yep. That was a while back.
Oh,
All
man.
right. I think we're ready
Okay.
to jump in. All right. See
Let
ya.
me put the link there really quick. We're going to talk about Jesus. I did not think that interview was going to go like that. I got to tell you. We're going to talk about this on Call In. I want to get your opinions and your perspective, how you feel about the rally, especially if you were there and you want to call in. Definitely call in, because I want to hear how you felt things went. So let me go ahead and put that link in the chat. Call in. Put the link there. Oh boy, I tell you. All right. It is pinned there to the chat. Oh, my makeup got smeary. It is pinned there to the chat. Sabby, it was great to meet you at the rally. Green Party of New Jersey, New York, Florida, Massachusetts, and DC made sure to show up and talk with those attending. For the 5 to 10 bad actors, there were 1,000 others and tourists. I hear you. I hear you. All right, let's head on over to Call In. This is episode 82, Rage Against the War Machine recap. I covered the rally. Looking at the views, looks like most of you saw it. What are your thoughts about the event? By the way, that live stream has over 30,000 views. So apparently a lot of people did care. So that's that. So awesome stuff. Let's head on over to Call In, guys. You know how we do this. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.